That day in Chicago, why did you stand up?
I didn't want to see you fail.
I wish Dad could. God, I love baseball.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where this week we are continuing our exploration of Barry Levinson's The Natural, starring Robert Redford. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host, former ball player in the Little Leagues for one season, and voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
So you had 1 year of Little League?
I played 1 year of Little League. We won the championship, and I never played again.
Well, you won.
1979. I luckily got onto a team with a lot of really good players in Prince William County and Dale City, where I grew up. I was lucky because I was good at catching fly balls. I was good at determining fly balls because I was a shit hitter. So by the end, I was barely playing, but I got into the championship game because one of the kids got hurt. And I think I hit a triple or a double. I can't remember what the hit was, but it was like a rarity. And I drove a run in, and I got on second or third base, one of those two. But I just remember that I was really good at snagging fly balls, so that's why I got picked. And near the end too, like last, and because I wasn't an athlete at 9 years old at all. But it was fun and it was incredible, and I couldn't believe we won the whole thing. And then I never played again because we won. What more is there to do?
You quit on top.
Yeah.
That's like why
Roy
go
Hobbs.
on?
I one season in the bigs, and that's it. Yeah.
I played Little League.
Yeah. Did you play?
Oh, yeah. 5 years old until 13 or 14.
Oh, wow. Oh, nice.
And my first team, by the way, which I think is 1976 or 5, was Jaws. We were the Jaws, which is hilarious.
That's awesome.
I played every single position except catcher.
Oh, okay.
I played in 4th grade. I played with a broken arm. I played second base with a broken arm and a cast.
Wow.
First base was my best position. But here's the thing. When I was a little kid, up until, let's say, 10 or 11, I was a very solid hitter.
Oh,
and
good.
then they invented this thing. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. It's called a curveball.
Really, Serrano? You couldn't hit the curveball, Serrano?
As soon as kids started throwing curveballs, my batting average went. I never figured it out. Never. And I remember I was a decent, solid first baseman. And so I remember getting to it's post Little League, and I forget it was like Babe Ruth League or something. And it was maybe you're going to play high school. And I was playing first base, batting 124 or something like that, because it was well advertised at this point. I could not hit a curveball. And it became very clear, oh, you're not going on. This is you've actually already gone a season too far with this thing.
Where you're at.
Yeah. Sorry, son. Time to go see a little chair we call the bench.
Well, I imagine you weren't you weren't dedicated to it, right? You weren't going with a hitting coach and going to the batting cage for hours on end, right? I know that probably would have improved you as a hitter, but clearly your interests weren't there, or you would have done it, I imagine.
Yeah, I did like playing baseball, but no, I wasn't. It's like we have our good friend Josh Moon. I went and played on his softball team.
Oh yeah, I did that once. Yeah,
yeah, and it was. They were all taking it more seriously than I think I was,
especially friend of the show, Vicky Keller, very serious about softball. Oh my God.
Very serious. But we're not talking about softball. We're not talking about Little League. We are talking about baseball, and arguably one of the greatest baseball films ever made, The Natural. And just before we jump into it, I just wanted to say that if you are interested in supporting the Cine-Files, the best ways to do it are on Apple Podcasts, on Patreon. Apple Podcasts, if you're an Apple person, if you're carrying around that iPhone, this is just a one-click thing to support the show, where you get ad-free versions of the show, or all of our Cinephile shorts, which we were just talking about a new topic today that we want to record. And on patreon.com/thecinephiles, there are those same ad-free versions of the show, the shorts, combined episodes where you take our multi-part episodes and we turn them into one. And of course, our advisory board, which has meetings every month, which are a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Another way you can support the show is if you listen to the sponsors that come in on the occasional breaks that we have during our episodes. If any of those products appeal to you or you're curious about trying them out, We'd love it if you used our code to get the discount. And also it lets the sponsors know that our audience supports their product and they want to keep and inspires them to keep sponsoring our show down the line. So, if you don't feel comfortable doing it one way, hopefully the other way with the products that you're getting out of your support will be a way that inspires you to support our show here on the Cine-Files.
So thank you very much in any way that you choose to support the show. And I think we should just get back right into the game.
Let's do it.
Because where we left off, we had just honored the late, great Bump Bailey, who gave his life, John, to play ball for the Knights.
Yes, he did. And what a weird accident. You don't even see because it's not Michael Madsen hitting the wall, by the way. You don't see the stunt person snap their neck or whatever. It seems like an innocuous hit.
Not that kind of movie, John.
Yeah, well, fair point. Although, we did shoot Robert Redford a few scenes
That's
ago.
true. That's fair.
And she threw herself off the building there. But the way he hits through the wall, it doesn't look like it's one of those things that would have him die. But I think this is these rare moments of levity that you use death for in films, right? And so Levinson is so genius with how he uses comedy in his movies.
Yeah.
It's not overt in some of his movies, right? And this is an inspirational drama, but it is a drama. And so these random moments of humor to alleviate the stress and the drama and the tension and the stakes that are happening in the film, I thought were great. And what a great way to have him go out. Nobody knows that he was taking money on the side to essentially screw the Knights over. He gets to die a false hero in this way, and he never has to endure the loss of Memo to Hobbs, which was totally going to happen. And instead he dies some false hero and the legacy. And these kids get to grow up talking about Bump Bailey, but never really know the real Bump Bailey.
Yep. And now, but the person they want to get to know is this guy who knocked the cover off the ball in the last game. And there's just I think Barry Levinson does a great job as the announcer as he steps up to the plate.
100%.
And we're building that anticipation. And I think this is one of those places in the movie where we know exactly what's supposed to happen next.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what does happen next. And that is exactly what we wanted. And we are very, very happy about it.
Yeah. We want it to happen next. And it does. Yeah.
Yeah. And he steps up, he swings.
Here comes the pitch. He swings. Long fly ball. Way back. Way up into the rafters there. An unbelievable hit from Roy Hobbs. Incredible power.
And then, of course, we're watching Memo, and we're watching this character, Gus, who we haven't quite met yet, but is going to become real important later on.
Yeah, Darren McGavin. What do you want me to say about Darren McGavin, right? Darren McGavin, the father in Christmas Story, Steve, what more do I need to say about this guy? Everybody knows Darren McGavin, a wonderful character actor. Of course, Kolchak, the Night Stalker, for those of us who are old enough to remember him from there, but numerous other roles, and just an incredible actor that always, how do I say this, gave so much life to whatever project he was a part of, and he is an utter a-hole in this movie. And this is my first exposure to Darren McGavin is this movie because I saw Christmas Story later in life. And so it was really weird for me to see Christmas Story after having seen this movie because I hated him so much in this movie as a young teen watching this film,
Yeah, I think this is my first experience with him too. And he definitely is an asshole in this film. It's also weird, and I've not quite gotten a straight story on it, which is that he is not credited in this movie.
Yes, he's not credited because he came on late in the casting process. They had someone else that they cast in that role, but then either scheduling issues or it didn't quite work out with some of the filming of the scenes. So they ended up replacing that actor with Darren McGavin. And apparently, from everything I've read in doing the research for the show as well, is that he just he came on so late that they didn't give him the credit and he didn't push for it. He just came in and did the job, had fun doing the film, and rolled on out. So it's an interesting situation. It's rare when an actor doesn't want to have credit or doesn't need to get credit,
This is where I go, because I've read that same story.
Yeah.
And this doesn't add up to me. It doesn't add up. I just don't. It doesn't, there are all sorts of actors who have come on late onto films.
Yeah, sure.
And they still got credit. I mean, there are actors that were replacements after the movie was, Michael J. Fox still got credit for Back to the Future, despite the fact that he replaced another actor. This happens all the time. So that's part of the story doesn't make sense. And I go okay, did he must have said, I do not want credit on this film.
That's what I'm saying. I think he probably just said, I don't want credit on it.
But why? It's so bizarre.
Actors are bizarre, brother. You go crazy trying to figure out why an actor doesn't do something or doesn't take something or takes something. You know what I'm saying? You've dealt with us. We're great.
All right. I guess that's true.
Wait. I
Okay.
think I found something.
Oh, well, you see, this is the magic of having the internet while we're actually recording the show. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, so apparently, look, I'm getting this off Google, so take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, is that he was uncredited in The Natural because he chose not to be credited after a disagreement over his billing. Because, as we said, he was cast late in the production. He would have received a lesser billing than the other stars, but union rules said McGavin's contract needed to be renegotiated for salary and billing. He haggled over the salary, which held up the production of the film. And then when they couldn't arrive to anything, he just instructed his agent to waive his billing. Yeah. But Robert Redford enjoyed him on the set so much that he expanded his role. So I think maybe that was the exchange. Like, okay, we're not going to give you billing on the film, but like, okay, fine, don't take the billing, but we'll give you more real estate in the film in order to be a bigger presence in the film, possibly. So I wonder if that's how they kind of came to a gentleman's agreement, for lack of a better term.
It's there's so many weird things that go on as you're trying to figure out how to make a movie, and that's just one of them. And I'm sure it was something like he wanted it to be and Darren McGavin,
probably,
or he wanted it to be one of those positions that's slightly elevated and not just in the middle.
Yes,
like one of because part of it is that when you give the and someone credit, you can't give another and someone credit unless the first and someone credit agrees to it.
Yeah, right.
And of course, then we're with Max, who's up in the press box and just stunned and in awe, trying to figure out who this guy is.
You've never seen Hobbs before in your life before he came here.
No, I already told you that.
We're in the locker room. It's after the game. Redford, I think, looks great in the white tank top with the, just seeing like he's got a muscular arm, and I just think he's looking good.
Yeah.
And one of the players comes up to him, Olsen, who's played by John Van Ness, to check out his bat.
This is the beginning of the mysticism of Roy Hobbs, right? Nobody knows you. How do you come out of nowhere? Like there's this thing. And I'm telling you this, Steve, and I think you know this as well. Baseball is a magical sport. It really is. More so than football or the NHL or soccer. And they all have, or football, whatever you want to say. They all have their magical moments, of course. But baseball has this kind of ethereal magic to it that for whatever reason, things happen in a certain way, timing wise, these things. And so when you're watching the movie, you could be like, well, this is like a fairy tale, or as we said in the first part, are the Arthurian story and all of this stuff. But we've seen magical stuff happen in baseball. So for us, it's not unheard of. I mean, Derek Jeter hits a walk-off single to win the game in his last at bat as captain of the New York Yankees. Like there's these little things you're like, how could that be possible? What are the odds of something like this happening? And so these little things that happen throughout the history of baseball. So something like what's the deal with your bat? What's this all about? That takes on a whole mystical. It's a sword. It's Excalibur.
Totally. What I hadn't thought about, until you just said that, was like, oh, he's the bat. He's the magical person that just showed up.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense and doesn't add up.
Right.
You know what I was thinking of, just in terms of what makes baseball magical compared to football. And football is my favorite sport to watch. But I think John Madden shows us exactly why football is not magical in the same way, which is you could take a football play, most amazing football play you've ever seen, and you could replay it in slow motion with someone with a pen, and they can explain to you exactly what happened. Like this guard pulled back a little bit that opened that thing, and this person did this, and this person picked up that block, and this person saw that, faked that, which made the receiver or the defenders go in that, and you could describe it, the whole thing. You can break down exactly what happened.
100%.
There can be two pitches in baseball. One pitch he misses, the other one he hits over the fence. And you can't look at that and know why one was different. Same players, same pitch, same moment, totally different things happen.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you can't analyze the play.
Oh, sure.
Okay, the pitcher chose to pitch the ball in this particular corner of the plate and tried to do whatever to trick the batter, but the batter was able to catch it. But there's such a human element, as I think you're getting to, Steve, is that's the thing that we can't quantify or predict. And that's why baseball has that magic to it, because you just never know.
Well, and part of it is just I think we probably said this when we did The Natural the first time, is I've always read that the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have someone who has a 300 batting average, which means they're among the greatest players in the game.
Yeah.
They are successfully hitting the ball less than 1 in 3 times. But it isn't that. That's not really what the number is, because they might have done that on a 3-2 pitch with 7 foul balls, which means they only hit it safely. Let me do my math. 3 and 2, 12. There was 13 pitches for them to hit that one ball safely. That's how hard this is to do.
Yeah. Agreed.
But the thing that Olsen is really excited about is that lightning bolt.
When I was a kid, my father gave me his collection of squadron insignias, the kind flying aces used to wear. Reminds me of that.
You could see that kind of clicks in his brain. Cut to, he's in batting practice, and he has the lightning bolt patch on his shoulder.
And I think this is something this film does really well, is these camaraderie moments among the team.
Yeah.
And if you listen to this movie on your headphones, you can hear all the comments they're making about him sitting up there. There seems to be a problem here, gentlemen. He's hitting the ball. Like these little comments of ball busting that the guys do, that is a part of the camaraderie of any sport. You know, it's what a lot of athletes say they miss the most once they leave the game, is that camaraderie with the guys or girls in the locker room.
Seems to be a slight mistake. Olsen's hitting the ball.
It just occurred to me.
Yeah.
Our psychiatrist, hypnotist guy, he was actually 100% right. Losing is like a disease, as contagious as syphilis. Is that, in fact, with Bump Bailey as the central player, the team losing all the time, it was contagious. And when now Roy Hobbs is in that position, now the team is starting to come together and starting to believe that they can win.
Yeah. Bump was syphilis. Roy is the cure. 100%.
Roy is the cure. Roy Hobbs, the cure for syphilis. They tried that as a slogan on the movie poster, and it just didn't track well.
Yeah, not 100%.
And from Olsen hitting well in the batting cage, we cut immediately to the camera tracking past every single player on the Knights team during the national anthem, each one now with a lightning bolt on their shoulder.
And they do sell these patches in real life, by the way, people. I don't know if people have ever done a deep dive on some of the merch for the Natural, but they do sell these patches in real life. You could put them on a jersey or on a shirt or whatever, or a jacket if you'd like. Yeah, it's a great homage to the film.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think this shot tracking past the players during the national anthem with the crowd out of focus in the background so sells me on this era.
Yeah. 100%. Great point, Steve. Yeah.
It totally works. And by the way, these are the crazy things that people do when they're trying to make a movie, which is that they really wanted to get the uniforms right.
Yeah.
And the problem is going to do research on this particular era of baseball. Almost all the photographs and film is black and white.
Yeah.
And so figuring out what the color really was is hard. So the costume team took a journey to Cooperstown.
Of course.
And they went through the old warehouses and storage, and they pulled out all these uniforms and looked at all the fabrics, looked at all the colors, and they're trying to reproduce them and getting them manufactured right. And they think they've got it all down. And then the uniforms all show up, and it is unquestionably the wrong shade of blue for the trim. And now they go, shit, this doesn't look right. This looks modern. This looks like the wrong thing. And so what they finally figured out to do was they got magic markers and went by hand and drew on the blue trim on every single one of these uniforms to get that color balanced.
Wow. That's a lot.
But this is, I mean, since the beginning of the Cine-Files, this is one of the big lessons that I think we want to teach is movies are a lot.
Yeah.
Great movies are people paying unbelievable close attention to all sorts of details that none of us ever notice. You know?
That's a great point. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I like the fact that whoever was the costume, that the costume designer, I don't want to say whoever, because of course we can name them, decided to make sure that the uniform had all the colors of the New York teams. I think I said that in episode 1, but I wanted to make sure I reiterated here. You got the pinstripes of the Yankees, you have the yellow and slightly light blue of the Mets. You had all the different colors from the New York teams that were at that time. The Brooklyn Dodgers. I mean, all of it is in there. And so I love that it has that combo, you know?
Yeah. And now we go into one of our many montages. And I think top to bottom, this movie has some of the best sports montages there are.
Agreed. With great music playing underneath it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this, of course, is the winning montage with Roy leading the team and then winning over and over again. And, of course, we also see his baseball cards being printed and the newspaper articles and the cover of Life magazine and all that stuff setting this up.
Which gives us the date, right? Like we have now where we're at, what time, what month it is, all these kinds of things that I think when you're trying to figure out when this is happening, it's 1939 clearly, and it's got all that stuff to it. So yeah, I appreciate that.
You know, one of the great things I realized about Robert Duvall watching this movie?
What's that?
Is that he can be interesting acting completely alone by himself.
Yeah.
Anything he wants to do, he does. I mean, how can somebody play that well that came from nowhere?
And structurally, of course, this is just, we have to check in on this thread to go, oh, we know that at some point Max is going to figure it out.
Yes.
But casting a guy like Duvall in it, you're fascinated by him just doing this little bit.
Yeah. So I'm glad they convinced him to do the movie because I think he's so essential to the success of the movie. Yeah, because Prosy is in it, Darren McGavin is in it, but it's Max Mercy who really serves as this kind of reminder of the past and the impending doom of the present that he's in, you know?
I think part of it with them, and obviously we're going to get into the Judge and Gus, but they're bad guys.
Yes.
And Max is clearly on the bad guys team,
right.
You know?
Right.
But I like Max Mercy on some level.
Do you really?
Know?
Oh,
yeah.
I do not. Because I think this is a commentary, and this is my opinion. Obviously, Steve doesn't have to share this opinion, nor it's not the official opinion of the Cine-Files. But my opinion is, and I want to make sure that's clear sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Max Mercy, to me, I think Barry Levinson is making a commentary on the sports writers who, at the time, in the 1980s, there was the real power of the sports writer, kind of like in the 70s, you had the real power of the film critic. Came in and were essentially going after these ball players to make a name for themselves, you know, to elevate themselves. And look, we have shades of it now with Stephen A. Smith and Colin Cowherd and Skip Bayless and all these other people who use players when they've never played the game. They come after these players in such vitriolic ways in order to make a name for themselves, right? And they find inventive ways to insult these players. And I think, I remember very clearly, Frank DeFord, some of the great, Kornheiser, some of the great sports writers from the 1980s, they had a real power to make or break a player and the public's narrative about them. And I'm sure that was even more powerful back in the 1940s or 30s when the game is happening here, or when the film is happening. So I think this is a little bit of Barry Levinson, who is a massive baseball fan from Baltimore, coming after these sports writers, maybe for some of the way they used baseball players to make a name for themselves. And later, near the end of the movie, you know, Max tries to say, well, I'd make you or break you. I'll outlive you. And that to me is a self-important person who's never played the game, because Roy asks him, did you ever play baseball? So I think there's a bit of a commentary on Max. But, I mean, that's irrelevant to whether you like him or not, because, of course, you're allowed to.
So I actually agree with every single thing you said. I totally agree with all that. It's just he is a likable bad guy to me, rather than
He's got a charm to him. Is what you're
there is
saying.
a charm.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say what I think I said in the first part is, my guess is I would love reading Max Mercy's column every week. I bet he's a good writer and I bet he makes that game super interesting and tells great stories.
But I think, but I bet you also might throw the paper on the ground.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right. In some of his columns, yeah.
Well, and particularly when I find out that he's in cahoots with the huge gamblers that are trying to, mess up the game.
Yeah.
There's a nice newsreel where Roy Hobbs is signing autographs for kids, but the key to it is that Iris is sitting in the movie theater watching.
Yeah.
And he's sitting getting a shoe shine with Red, who tells him the story about Pop. And this is what we've alluded to a little bit before, but now we hear all the details, which is that Pop got into financial problems. The judge came in to help, but the deal is, if he doesn't get the pennant, the judge is going to take the team away from Pop. One of my favorite Barry Levinson things is his ability to have meaningless small talk that I adore. And we're sitting there at a practice, and Pop and Red are playing a little game of Name That Tune.
Dear old girl.
She speaks of how I love you. I'd have bet money you wouldn't know that song.
And is it necessary to the movie? No. Does it advance the story in any way whatsoever? No. Do I absolutely adore every second of it? I totally do.
Yeah, because it builds character, right, for those two guys. Because now Robert Redford takes center stage. And if you notice, Pop and Red kind of recede a little bit. And so you have to give them certain moments to keep this going. So it also conveys how much happier they both are with the team. Because remember, it was before that, before Roy shows up, I should have been a farmer. There's both of them are kind of, he's stomping around. The other Red is just kind of sitting there quietly listening to him rant and rave. Now they're playing that game, so they're much more relaxed in the situation, which gives us a much more like happier approach to the movie.
Well, and Pop was, as you said, Pop was not necessarily that likable.
No,
when we started, and now we love him.
Yeah, totally.
But the other thing, of course, that's going on is Max Mercy is trying to solve this mystery. You can tell that he is obsessing over this thing.
Yep.
And he's watching the practice, and Roy is heading back to the dugout and is walking by the pitcher's mound. And
Hey, Roy, pitch it in. Come on, let me see what you got.
it's what's so great about it is this the moment they suggest that Roy Hobbs should pitch.
Yeah.
We're connected to this whole other part of the story that nobody on the field knows about.
Yeah.
And the weight, the contemplative moment of Roy stepping up onto the mound.
I don't think he's thrown a ball in 16 years. Pitched a ball. In 16 years.
My guess, and they don't fill in any of why he was the greatest pitcher ever and shows up as a right fielder.
Yeah.
We never discuss it. My guess is he tried to pitch when he was, 16 years ago or 15 years ago,
right,
and couldn't for whatever reason. Pain was, whatever's going on in his body, couldn't do it.
Right.
And then when he steps onto the mound, we hear the sound of a train in the distance.
Yeah.
Now, there's no reason that there should be a train here.
No.
Except that trains are symbolic, like thunder is symbolic,
Well, of course, for him, too, because that's where he met What's-Her-Face, Bird. Yep. And also, I think the pitching thing, I think it's PTSD. To pick up the ball and pitch reminds him of how he met Bird, which was striking out the whammer. So all of that, I think there's a lot of weight to it. And Robert, which is why he's a damn good actor, I think if you watch this scene and you watch him closely, he is playing all of that with every movement he makes until he throws that ball. And I think it's fantastic. Nonverbal acting that lets you feel that all of that is happening.
This to me is the greatest thing about Robert Redford is it's all the stuff that's going on inside in simplicity, never big, but there's always stuff going on.
Yeah.
And the music starts to build and they're calling him to make the throw and he pitches, of course, in slow motion and there's the throw. And just like with the whammer, it goes real fast and suddenly that ball is like embedded in the mesh of the batting cage,
Again, the magic, right? The fact that he was able to do this. Because his first pitch we ever saw him throw was the one shattering the farmhouse there with the chicken and then striking out the whammer as quickly as he did. And then this just sticking it in the mesh there behind home plate. It's hilarious.
And the reaction from the batter, from the catcher, from everybody who's watching it. Also, it clearly hurts Roy's side when he throws that ball.
Yes.
And the last thing we cut to is the empty stands where Max was sitting.
Great editing decision.
Yeah.
Steve, you don't need to see him leave. The fact that he's gone where we once just saw him makes us go, oh shit, he remembers. He thinks he's going to remember now. Son of a bitch.
It's so perfect storytelling because you're right. We just, everyone in the audience is going, oh shit.
What's up?
That's the judge.
The judge?
Yeah, he wants to see you. Maybe I should go with you.
No, I can handle it.
So now we go up to the judge's office. The secretary sends him in. It comes into a very dimly lit room where we see the judge.
Yeah, this is Robert Prosy, as you said, Steve. Of course, we've done one of his movies already with Broadcast News. He was so good in Broadcast News there. But he was in Thief, which is one of my favorite Michael Mann films with him and James Caan and Tuesday Weld. Christine, the great Stephen King horror film there as well. Gremlins 2, The New Batch, Hoffa, Mrs. Doubtfire, Last Action Hero, Rudy, which is probably one we'll never do on the show. I just do not like that movie. Dead Man Walking, but he was a Polish American actor. It was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here, his father was a grocer and a butcher. He was raised in a working class neighborhood and studied at the American Theater Wing as an actor. So his stage stuff is so powerful. So many people have seen his stage stuff, and that's where he kind of made his bones as an actor. He also served in the United States Air Force during the Korean War, got a hardship discharge to help with a family store when his father died suddenly, then found his way into movies. And of course, another one of his movies, Mrs. Doubtfire. I hope you all remember him in Mrs. Doubtfire. And you know what's a big tidbit that I discovered in researching for him? He was up for playing the John Mahoney character as Frasier's dad in Frasier. It was between him and John Mahoney. and they went with John Mahoney, but they did bring Prosky back for a 2-episode arc where he played like essentially like a J.D. Salinger author that both Fraser and Niles were crazy about, and they have to struggle with whether to read his new book because he hadn't written a book in 30 years, and he accidentally leaves his manuscript there in their apartment while he goes off with John Mahoney because he's friends with John Mahoney because John Mahoney never treats him like the big famous author. So a lot of good stuff from him. He played Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman, and sadly passed away in 2008 at the age of 77, where? In Washington, D.C., where he had done a lot of plays throughout the years. So a really phenomenal actor. And every time I've seen him in films, he's just so memorable, whether he's playing a good guy or a bad guy. And here he is. It's a really interesting portrayal he does here.
It's great. It's great. And so the way I think he got cast is Barry Levinson, who's a Baltimore guy, had seen him in regional theater in the area and just said, this is the guy. And I agree with you. His performance is so great.
Well, it's a swell office.
Mere creature comforts.
Could use a little more light, though.
Which the judge first ignores, asks where he's from. Roy dodges the question. And then he gives this explanation. And I'm just going to give you this whole speech because I love what Prosky does with this.
You see, as a youngster, I was frightened of the dark, and I used to wake up sobbing in it as if it was water, and I was drowning in it. But as you will observe, I have so thoroughly disciplined myself against that fear that now I much prefer a dark room.
I don't know why that monologue, the way he speaks, what you see, he has gone through, the ridiculousness of the whole statement, like it's a wonderful creation of this very particular bad guy.
Great writers know how to write dialogue for specific characters, right? And give them almost completely different type of dialogue than the dialogue we've heard from other characters in the film. That's how a character can stand out. And certainly the judge, all of a sudden, the way he speaks is almost like a mythical villain. You know, I was born and I was afraid of the dark, but I made the dark my friend. I doused myself in the dark, and now I have command of the dark. You know, there's this thing of how he's presented in such a weird and unusual way. And look, there's a long history of weird owners in baseball. So it makes all the sense in the world that this guy would be the owner and have this kind of aura to him and this story of mastering the dark. Therefore, he sits in the dark all the time. You know, so
there's a lot of history of weird owners in basketball, of weird owners in football. There's like a lot of weird. I mean,
sports owners, period. Yeah, true.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird ones. And then we get Roy's response, which is like perfectly Midwestern simplicity.
The only thing I know about the dark is you can't see in it.
What is Roy's worldview based on? It's based on the farm, and Iris, and all that is good colliding with the city and Harriet and the Whammer and Max and all that is dark, you know?
Yeah.
Which is interesting in relationship to baseball because baseball is a pastoral game. It is a game about it is not an urban game, you know?
Right.
Even though obviously some of the great teams are in some of our great cities.
Yeah.
And then I love this bit of dialogue.
A pure canard.
What's a canard?
A prevarication.
What does that mean?
A lie.
It's like intellectual dominance over Roy, like he's trying to dominate him in some way. Because why use those big words, you know?
Exactly, which is what, and Roy doesn't even need to call it out, which is, he just lets it linger there, which I think is a great decision to just have him just stare at him. Why didn't you just say a lie?
You can see, you know.
Well, not good enough.
My feeling watching this is that he knows that this is the devil here to buy his soul, you know?
Yeah.
As soon as he walks in the office, he knows what he knew about it when Pop said, "Do you want me to go with you to see the judge?"
Right.
You know,
it's like Lord of the Rings, right? It's Sam offering to carry Frodo up to the thing now, but this time Frodo doesn't take Sam's offer and goes by himself to confront the situation. But yeah, I mean, he's the hero. He has to go and face the test himself.
Yeah. You see me, don't you?
Maybe I do, maybe I don't.
I think one of Roy's big things, which we're going to get to later, is not seeing the evil early enough.
Yeah.
You know, because that's how he felt about Harriet. By the way, so in the book, Roy is not getting paid very much. He asked to go see the judge so he can ask for more money. His entire purpose showing up to see the judge is to get more money, and the judge won't give him any more money, and he ends up just kind of begging for more money and debasing himself in the movie because he wants money. That's why he's here.
In the book, yeah.
In the book.
Yeah.
And this
Remind
is
me not to read that book.
No, it's not. There are about 10,000 books I would recommend before. I mean, it's not a bad book. It's just not for me. And particularly if you love the movie, it just kind of violates the whole thing.
Stands have been constantly filled. Financial fortunes have been radically reversed since you joined the organization.
I hadn't noticed.
And this is where the judge is going to offer him more money.
You want to pay me more money, that's up to you.
And what that means is the Roy Hobbs of the movie is here for baseball.
Yep.
Right? He is not here for money. And he's definitely not here to throw any games for the judge.
Yeah, and it's also a way of saying to him, like, you have no power over me. So whatever you want to do, but I'm not asking for anything. He's not saying to him, don't pay me more because I don't want the guy. No, he's saying, if you want to pay me more, that's your decision. But I'm not going to ask for anything. And I think that's how he maintains the heroic status while also being somewhat realistic about this situation for people who are watching it in 1984. You don't turn down the money, but you also don't ask for the money. Right. And I think that's a fine line he walks here as our protagonist.
I keep thinking about the verdict because we just did it and there's so many connections. And one of them, so in both cases, idealistic young people that a terrible thing happened to them that sent them kind of into the wilderness for a long time and they're coming back.
Yeah.
When Frank Galvin is coming back, at first, money. Right. That's all he's interested in. And he is totally happy to sell his soul for the money up until the time that he really sees that woman when he takes the photographs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Roy, in the book, he's very much like that, very much interested in the money. But the Roy in the movie is much more pure.
Yeah, and you have to look at 1980s cinema, right, Steve? I mean, there was an undercurrent or an overcurrent, I would say, of like greed, Wall Street, all these other films that show the possibility of success and money, Scarface, all these films that were about celebrating people who made a lot of money, whether they died young like Scarface or were thrown in prison eventually like Gordon Gekko is. There was this yuppies approach to the world, but as a counter to that, there were also films like this that were trying to show people that that money wasn't the answer, that money was the root of all evil, and then there's a way of living a life that is more noble, has more class to it than chasing the dollar. And I don't know if nowadays we've lost that. I don't know. I want to believe we haven't. And it's a fascinating battle that you see every day when you see influencers versus people who work for their money hard. And then you see how these lives burn out, these influencer lives burn out, and they're not for the young. They're not for the old. And so how much of a time frame do you have in that life, and the amount of work and evilness that you have to trade in on in order to be successful? There's a lot to it. And so, is that a chasing the buck? Lying, misinforming just to make money? There's all kinds of stuff. And so it's just fascinating. That's always been a thing we battle with in our society. And you see it clearly in the movie here.
It's a much bigger discussion than we can have at this time. But I really think that there's a set of values that got brought in, particularly starting in the 80s, that narrowed what we think of as self-interest.
Yeah,
and people just go, everybody's acting out of self-interest. And the way we define self-interest is frequently about money and material possessions, fame, things like that. And I think those lead us to a lot of really crappy places.
Yeah.
Let me put it to you this way. There's no way I'm going to let you steal this club from Pop.
I love that Hobbs, on his way out, turns on that light switch.
Defiance, man. I love it. It doesn't have to be big and robust. It's just a simple turning on of the light. And the way this guy immediately regresses to being a child and yelling at him, the judge, saying, "You come back here. You turn that light off. You turn that infernal thing off." Like, it's great. And Roy's probably smirking to himself as he's walking past the secretary.
And then the light switch turns back on, and there is Gus. And I don't know where he's been hiding in this room, or maybe he's been
dark in the corner. Yeah,
he's not as greedy as Bump. He'll be hard to work with, but we'll get him.
I think it's a great scene and I love it. But what I think is weird, and this is the weirdness of the movie, is based on this scene, he has listened to Red, he listened to Pop, he's looked at the situation, he completely understands what's getting on, he sees through the judge in an instant and is 100% morally. This is a guy who has deep wisdom, you know what I mean, from all of his experiences out in the world. He sees through people, he understands what right and wrong is, and he's gonna stand up and do the right thing. That's how this scene feels, right?
Yeah.
Later on, that's not going to be true.
Well, you can be noble and still have blind spots.
No, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
But the way part
Especially
of it is
when they're beautiful blind spots.
It's true, but part of it is Redford's performance, which has all those subtleties and the wisdom and all those the wheels turning, make you go, how can you not see through this thing that's so obvious?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where the age thing becomes an issue, because if this is the kid in his 30s, I say a kid, Jesus, Steve, a young person in their 30s, maybe we buy it more that he's can be noble in one scene, but a bit shaky later on. So
yeah. Hobbs is walking out of the stadium, and Max Mercer runs up to him.
You know, old Sam Simpson died before he could give me the lowdown on you. You know.
The minute he says that, it's just like, there it is.
Yeah.
And then he shows them the drawing.
What you have in your hand there is a great story, but I want it all a Max Mercy exclusive.
And then this is this is to exactly the point I was talking about. Is there any reason that Roy Hobbs doesn't see through Max Mercy?
Well, I don't think he knows that he's connected with the judge yet, or connected with Gus. But I think he sees Max Mercy as a necessary evil in the game, a sports writer. And remember, it's been 16 years, right? What experience did he ever have with a sports writer as a pro ball player? Zero, right?
That's fair.
So he only knows maybe what he's heard in passing, maybe ran into people who've played in the game during his last 16 years as working wherever he's been working. And they've talked about dealing with sports writers or whatever, but he's never had personal experience. So I think this is still kind of all new to him, how he's navigating this stuff.
We cut to a very, very fancy club, and everyone is in tuxedos except for Roy Hobbs, who comes in with Max Mercy, which means that after this scene outside the stadium, Max said, hey, I want to take you out, introduce you to some people. And Roy said, okay.
Yeah. There is something to be said about Roy Hobbs's temptation of the other side, right? I mean, the allure of the money, the allure of what we're about to meet Memo, the allure of, full on meet Memo, the allure of this life, right? He's a country farm boy. And that doesn't mean you can, even at 30, whatever he's supposed to be, 35, whatever, it doesn't mean you can't be snowed by it, tempted by it, intrigued by it, because you have to explore the temptation in order to come out the other side and resist it. You know, I think in a story like this, I don't mean all the time. And so it is fascinating that he goes with Max to this event, right? I mean, he must, as you said, he must sense that there's something in Max. And the more he spends time with Max, the more he's going to figure out who he is fully. And so does he want to risk that? So he likes to put his hand in the fire a little bit, no matter how heroic he is.
Well, this is why I brought up the thing in the scene with the judge, and this is where I go. This is why I adore this movie. I absolutely love it. It moves me totally. But this is why I don't think this is a perfect movie in the way that I felt that the verdict is, which is that there's a mismatch between Redford's performance and the world-weary wisdom and how he sees through everybody and what's happening now in this scene.
We're gonna meet a guy named Gus Sands, all right?
Who's he?
Gotta be kidding. He's only a $10 million a year bookie. You never heard of him?
No.
Which at this moment, Roy Hobbs should walk out, you know?
Yeah, but again, I mean, he's a flawed protagonist. And I think this is actually, I hear your point of view, but I think they wrote him this way so that he is relatable to a lot of people.
Okay.
You know, and I don't mean like, look, 100%, your point of view clearly is valid. I mean more like, and it could be a fault of the film. I just see it more as like, well, how are we going to get people to see this guy as human rather than a god? And because he is a god. And so you must have, you have to show him having these kind of very human foibles, and the audience themselves, possibly, what would they do in these situations? Would they explore the wealth of the rich, all this kind of stuff? And look, this all leads to the confrontation with Glenn Close near the end of the movie in the hospital, where he says, I wanted this and I wanted that and I wanted this. And she's like, there are two lives we live. And that really kind of shakes him, because that's what Roy is battling with, I think, through the whole movie is, I should have gotten all this stuff. I never got it. I'm coming back in the game. I'm still noble. But the temptation of this life that I could have led is always just hanging around. I don't think he's as wise as you in my opinion. I don't think he's as wise as you think he is. I think he's still navigating this thing, but he has very strong fundamental principles about right and wrong. But I don't think he's experienced any of this. So it's all kind of new to him, and we're experiencing it with him, you know.
I think that you are right in terms of the film. I totally think you're right. And in particular, I think that kid that said, I want to walk down the street and people say, there goes Roy Hobbs. He is not let go of that.
No, he's still in there. Almost a state of Arrested Development in a way. Yeah.
Totally. And you and I both know there is a certain point in your life, because you and I have both been there, where we've had to go, oh, that's not happening.
Yeah. It's not for me anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And Roy hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, no.
So he comes down. I love, by the way, little bits of dialogue like, they don't have bands like that back in Nebraska, do they? Not where I'm from, but they don't have them there either.
So how did it go today, Slugger?
Well, he did better than we did. He got, 5 out of 5 in the first and 3 for 4 in the second.
What does it mean for Max to say we?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think he is saying, I am in on your gambling schemes. I am part of your operation. He's saying we with Gus. He knows that Gus bet against Roy Hobbs.
Okay.
And we did not do well.
But would Max sell himself out that quickly?
This is why these are my issues. These are why I go like, this isn't a perfect movie for me.
Yeah.
Because you would never say that, you know?
Yeah.
But that's what I think it means.
Oh, what do you know? That's going to cost me a pretty penny.
Oh, how's that?
Well, I bet against you today.
You bet against the Knights?
No, just against you, kid.
Because he's betting on one player. It's like he's got playing fantasy sports long before they exist.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, doing the prop bets in essence.
Oh, you can bet against anybody, anything. Strikes, balls, hits, runs, errors, anything. Take your pick. I once bet $100,000 on 3 pitched balls.
Now, is that a reference to the Whammer situation?
That was exactly the same question I was going to ask. My feeling is, yes, I think what he is saying is, Max told me who you are and your backstory. I know. Yeah. That's what I think.
Fair enough.
How'd you make out?
Didn't. But the next week, I ruined the guy with a different deal. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
I think Darren McGavin's so good in this.
Yeah, he's so great as like this comfortable. He's one of those people that irritates the piss out of you, because no matter what situation he's in, he's going to spin the narrative to a positive in his favor. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Win some, you lose some. Well, I'm down one day, up the next. Oh, I'm going to do this or that. But it's all because he's fixing the fucking games.
Exactly.
So there's an ease of immorality to him that is unsettling. And I think it's really unsettling for people to conceive of how many people are like this, and you don't want to believe it, but there are quite a lot of people who are quite happy being immoral because it lines their pockets, and it's an unsettling thing to see for sure.
There are many ways in which I was and continue to be a naive person. And one of them is like, that just doesn't compute to me, like, what's the point of winning if you cheat?
I know. And this is where Steve and I always have like the differences, right? I'm much more cynical about the world. Steve, It doesn't mean that Steve can't be cynical and Steve.
Well, I know the reality.
Yeah.
But it's like, it doesn't, that's not how my brain works. I have to think about, this person is happy to cheat in order to beat you.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? One of the ball players was a Yogi, or one of the ball players who said, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And that's, in every game you see ball players cheat in micro ways, not in macro ways, in micro ways, when they go like, oh, I didn't commit the foul. What are you talking about? I never did that. When they know they did, right? And it is all of that happens through the course of a game in almost any sport multiple times throughout the game, both players on both teams, and fans themselves. I don't know how many times I've seen fans in a stadium boo a very obvious, legitimate foul or penalty against their team. And it's because they, they're snowed by their fandom, but they also are okay kind of cheating to win in the small micro ways, So it's inherent in any sport, the idea of cheating. The overt cheating is where people make the big stands on and stuff. But I think every game, most fans are essentially trying to push their team to cheat to win,
Well, and I'm actually, we talked about this before, is that there's a certain amount of pushing the rules that is absolutely part of the game.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of holding on the line, a little bit of, getting a little bit physical in the paint, that's just the game.
That's just the game. Yes.
When you pay someone to not play well, we're not in the game anymore.
That's the macro is what exactly. Yeah. Bigger cheating. Yeah.
But for Gus, there's no distinction. That distinction is like, well, I'm just playing to win.
Yes. I'm using all the tools at my resources that I'm allowed to use. Well, they're not that I'm allowed, but that I can use in order to win. Yes, exactly.
Yep. And then what's really interesting is he says, that because Gus is like, eventually I'm going to clean up. He goes, how are you going to do that? He says, when you're not batting so good.
I lost with you today, but some of the time I'll clean up double. How are you going to do that? When you're not batting so good.
Which is like Gus is saying, like, I only bet against the Knights and against Roy Hobbs. Like, that's a weird stance, but that is sort of what the movie is setting up, is that Gus is just going to continually bet against the Knights.
Right.
And then we go into this thing where the way that Gus knows how to bet is the magic eye.
Oh, God.
And he's going to show him how it works versus, I like the moment of, well, how about bet $1,000? He goes, how about $100? The judge. Then Darren McGavin covers one eye and does this crazy thing that is really funny.
Yeah, because he can make his eye go big.
Yeah, look at that. And the bet is, how much money does Roy Hobbs have in his pocket? And he goes, you got $10.
Yeah.
And Memo is watching very excitedly. He pulls out $8.
You lose.
And the silver?
Pulls out the silver, $1.37.
Just a lucky guy, Gus.
That's pretty good. I owe you 100.
Ah, forget it. Someday you'll maybe do me a favor.
Don't bet on it.
By the way, $100 in 1939 is $2,191, Steve.
Crazy bet.
On a bet like that. Crazy. Yeah.
The don't bet on it is, again, Roy Hobbs completely seeing through the situation and understanding, like, no, I am not throwing a game for you.
Yeah.
And then he says, excuse me, and does the little magic trick and pulls out $3 silver from Memo's hair.
I think you overlooked these, Gus. Do we call it even?
This whole scene is a foreshadow for where the rest of the movie is going to go.
Yeah.
Right? Gus thinks he can size up Roy, but Roy always has a trick up his sleeve to counter Gus. And Memo is actually disappointed that Roy doesn't win in the initial thing, but then when he pulls out the coin, she realizes he wins in that little game they're playing, and she kind of semi-cheers him on. It's been fascinating for me watching the movie again for our conversation, Steve. I have a lot more sympathy for Memo than I did when I've watched this movie a million times before. And probably because I haven't watched this film in years, and doing the show has made me look at films completely differently when we prepare for our show. And she is someone who essentially fell into this situation as a young woman, and she relies on these men to fund her life, and she's essentially trapped, right? And I think she sees Roy as a way out of the hell that she's in essence. She's like this person who's been taken over or made a deal with the devil young in her life, but here comes this noble knight who can possibly save her from this life that she's lived. And she immediately sees that he's completely different than any other person that she's been connected to, including Bump Bailey. Like, there's possibilities here. So even at the table, she's cheering for him in some small way that carries on throughout the whole movie. No matter how many evil things she does, which is, of course, feeding him the poisoned food later, there is this sense of like she's just stuck in the situation, has to do what she has to do to survive in it. But she does legitimately care for him almost from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I go as far as you do. And it's funny to me
fair.
that you
Totally fair.
normally it's usually reversed, that I'm the more like, look at the evil character and go, no, I see some sympathy in there. But in this case, so this case, well, we'll see as we keep going.
Well,
But by the way,
I've always had a thing for beautiful, crazy women. So,
I'm going to leave that one alone. But by the way, in the book, Roy doesn't lose just one bet. He doesn't lose just two bets. He loses 3 double or nothing bets in a row. And then he does magic tricks later on as a distraction. So it's definitely not. Roy gets his ass kicked. He got his ass kicked by the judge when he's asking for money in the book. And in this scene, he totally gets wiped out by making stupid bets that he shouldn't make.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's just a very, very different story. They're very different characters. Roy asks Memo if she'd like to dance.
It's nice to know my hair is full of silver. Can you read my mind, too?
No, I'm not good at that. You don't mind if I just look.
Isn't that what you've been doing?
So far.
I know I've told this story like 20 times now, but when Mike Nichols was thinking about casting Robert Redford in the lead role in The Graduate, and he asked Redford, Bob, have you ever not scored with a girl? And Redford's response was, what do you mean not scored? And that line of the confidence of the line, so far, that reminds me of, what do you mean not scored?
Exactly.
So far it's fun. Does it get better in private?
So maybe you've given a hint of what your answer to this question will be, but is she already under instructions from Gus?
Yeah, I think so. Whatever debt she has to pay off to Gus must be a lifelong debt. And I think, unfortunately, she's manipulated to do certain things by Gus in order to keep paying off her debt. It's kind of an ugly underbelly of this movie. They never explain the relationship she has with Gus. And it's left to your imagination. But I imagine 1939, when women don't have a lot of power in our society, and there's a man here, an way older man with money. You can imagine that he might have, worst case scenario, won her in a bet from a guy and took her as his property in essence. And so I think he's absolutely pawning her off on Roy in order to manipulate the situation because he's working for the judge. And Bump Bailey was the star on the team, and he was the cancer killing that team. Now she's instructed to get close to Roy so he can become the cancer on the team. And they do go on a losing streak very soon.
I mean, she clearly seems to be a cooler.
Yeah, she's a cooler for sure.
Yeah. We end up with them on the beach. Again, it's beautifully, beautifully, beautifully shot.
It's strange, but ever since the hotel, I feel like we've met before.
It's such an interesting, the parallels they create filmically, I think, between Harriet and Memo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Character-wise, they're totally different.
Yes.
But they're both women in black, and they're both different versions of evil temptation.
Yeah, I don't know if I see her as evil, but yeah, I hear how you could see her that way. For sure.
So I want to be clear about what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm not saying that she is evil. I'm saying she is the temptation towards evil.
Towards evil, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
Like money is not necessarily evil, but money can be the temptation that leads you to do evil.
Yes.
I
want to find out one day.
Well, you don't need to have money tempt you to do evil.
Well, that's a fair point.
Money tempts people to do all sorts of stuff, and they don't actually end up with the money. That's part. By the way, that's part of money's evil temptation.
You're right.
That you don't even fucking get it. Yeah.
So what about you?
What about me?
So now it's your turn to tell.
Me? What's there to tell?
Man, Roy's ability to not give out any information is really powerful. There's just another amazing shot of them through the fog, silhouetted, the cars with the headlights in the background. It just looks gorgeous.
But Gus, he's quite a character.
And then she gives her history with Gus, that she met through Bump.
Yeah.
And then she says, and this is where I do have sympathy for her.
I'm not waiting for true love to come along, Roy. I never have. I've known a million guys. Bump was swell. He was real swell, but typical. You're not like him. Or anyone else.
Yeah, she knows that immediately,
She totally confesses, which I think she instinctually knows she has to be more honest with Roy, maybe than she was with Bump, because she
Bump's
says
stupid. She could easily snow him. Yeah.
Gus gives me things. Things I've never had in my life. Anything wrong with that?
Not if you understand the risks.
So, does Roy think at this point that she has slept with Gus?
No, I don't think so. I think he knows that she's essentially not enslaved, but
certainly in his employ.
Yes, I guess that's the way I would look at it. Right. Yeah. Like Gus controls her, I guess. And so he's very clear of the connections. But remember, Roy's a hero. So maybe Roy sees Memo as someone he can save, someone he can pull away from the big baddie, which is why he wants the information. And look, what Memo tells him may not be the truth at all. Remember, she's an unreliable narrator of her story because we've seen her manipulate, lie, and then eventually poison Roy later on. But she's not someone that we should be trusting her story about what happened with Gus and how she met Gus. That could be, I mean, do you think she would reveal herself just because she met Roy 2 hours ago? No, Gus has told her, as you said, like instinctually, like tell him the truth, but kind of massage the truth a little bit, bring him into your trust by being a little more open with him as you see fit, but I don't know if I trust what she's saying is the truth. But Roy is immediately like, because he's a hero, he's immediately interested to know more because he wants to save her, At least I think that.
I am trying to think how to say what I want to say, which is that my gut is probably if Gus had wanted to sleep with her, he could have slept with her.
Right.
And I have no idea whether he did or whether he didn't. But I don't like the word ownership. Mm-hmm. But I think his control over Memo is pretty damn close to 100%.
Agreed. And I think he's probably impotent. I think Gus is probably impotent, which he doesn't.
Well, whether he is or it isn't, I think where we probably agree is I think where Gus gets off on something else.
Yes.
On power, on money, on beating other people, on control, on all those things.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think this is where I'll stop hitting it at some point, or maybe I won't. But like going back to Roy's character of like he sees through all of this when she says, as long as you understand the risks, he is saying, I understand this situation that you are in with Gus.
Yes.
And then she says, touch me. And then they kiss. And the note I wrote down is, who is it that doesn't understand the risks? I mean, it's just so like you get introduced to the biggest gambler in New York who is betting against the Knights. And now you are out with the woman who is controlled by him, who buys her things.
Right.
And you're just, and again, your point is totally well taken. She is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And Roy is strangely naive in this weird way.
He has a blind spot with these dangerous women. And look, a lot of men have blind spots when it comes to women. And look, women when it comes to men as well.
Absolutely.
There's blind spots there. I mean, how many great women do we know that have dated guys that are like, what are you doing? Or vice versa, right? And so it's part of it. And Roy, I think, that's why I don't see Roy as this kind of infallible person.
No, you're correct. That is who he is in the film.
And he's got, I don't know, it's just my opinion. And I just see him having these flaws. And they're frustrating flaws, Steve, that our heroes have sometimes. And you're just like, why? Why, Pete Rose, did you bet on baseball? Why the fuck would one of the greatest ball players in the world ever in the history of the game, who gave every ounce of sweat, blood, and tears to the game, why the fuck would you bet on your own team in baseball? And it's just mind-blowing what our heroes do sometimes. And I think that's what makes Roy human in the movie. I think if you hadn't had these kind of blind spots or foibles, I don't think the movie is as powerful when he gets his redemption near the end, So I hear you. It's frustrating. You're like, oh no, don't do this again. Wasn't one gunshot in your belly enough?
Yeah. The Pete Rose example is a great one. You've kind of sold me about this concern. Is even though it's still Probably what it is if I were writing the script or directing this movie, I would have pulled the balance a little bit differently. Except for the fact that I absolutely adore this movie, and I'm really glad that I neither wrote nor directed it, because then I wouldn't have this great movie, you know? Yeah. So this is where, and I think it's an issue, you know, to me, it's like the interesting points. There are a lot of different ways to do things, and my approach isn't right for all things. There are all sorts of things my approach is wrong for, you know?
And there are all sorts of things your approach would be right for. You know, yeah, it all just depends on your own personal thing. And remember, Roy keeps the money from the judge. Roy returns the money only after he has the conversation. With Glenn Close. So
he's tempted.
Yeah, he's a man that can be tempted.
Yeah,
you know.
By the way, in the book, when they're driving home from this scene, she actually like hits a kid with the car, and they are like a hit and run. There's also a weird thing in the book where one of her breasts is extremely painful, and the implication is maybe she has breast cancer or something. And there's like weird symbolism of like the maternal figure who's filled with sin or cancer and evil. It's like all this stuff that's like, yeah, it's weird. It's a weird book.
I'm never reading this book.
No. They're coming into the hotel. It's morning, and there's Pop sitting in the chair with the newspaper. It's obviously been like up all night.
I could find you, you know, and I would too if you were making any money.
Well, wait till next year.
Well, there might not be a next year for you. You keep booking stunts like this. How long you been seeing her anyway?
Since tonight.
So let's talk about this situation.
Okay.
Are the judge and Pop brothers?
Oh, I've never had that thought.
Because she says that Memo is his niece.
Yes.
Is that the judge's daughter? Is Memo the judge's daughter?
I never thought that.
Right. But this is the thing. Like, how could she be a part of his team and be essentially a cooler on his team, and he's okay with her sticking around as his niece? How does he not have power as her uncle to be like, look, get away from my fucking ball club? Or I'm going to talk to my brother, and he's going to get you away from the ball club. Like, that's the question I have about, this is the big question I have about the movie, where I know you have issues in certain ways. This is the issue I have. How come Pop doesn't get her away from his team if that's his niece? Like, there must be something he could have done. And I just have, in my mind, I've always kind of accepted that Pop and the judge are brothers, possibly. And she is possibly the judge's niece. I mean, sorry, the judge's daughter or the judge's granddaughter. And so in my mind, there's something that keeps her close to the ball club, and it must be family connected, you know? And so I just kind of look at it that way. Because
I never had the thought that it was the judge's daughter. But it is certainly, the whole situation is really weird. And I will say something else, a hot take, if you will. I don't think Pop is a particularly good manager.
Oh, wow. That is a hot take.
Like, his team is just doing terribly, and he's just kind of yelling at people. He makes them listen to the stupid psychiatrist over and over again.
I agree.
I think that without Roy Hobbs, Pop is not a great manager.
That's actually an excellent point. You know, and that happens in all sports. A lot of people right now, I know for people who get this reference, I don't know how many of you are NFL watchers, but like Sean Payton right now, a lot of people are questioning whether he was actually a really good coach because his Denver Broncos over the last 3 years have been crap. But when he had Drew Brees as his quarterback in the New Orleans Saints, he was incredible. Look at Belichick without Brady, 8-8 with the Browns, 7-9 with the Browns, and then terrible seasons with the Patriots. And yeah, they got into one playoffs, I think, with whatever their young quarterback was. But like, he's never been as great without Tom Brady. So it's these questions you can have. Phil Jackson never coached teams to the finals that were like not led by superstars. So you can make arguments about certain coaches and how they need star players in order to show how great they are. You know?
So I watched the Joe Montana multiple part documentary. Yeah. I forget what it was on. I really liked it. And obviously, growing up in San Francisco, like that's my era where I really was watching the 49ers.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that was interesting watching it was that the way the myth of that era had always gone was that Bill Walsh was not unlike a god.
Yeah.
Like the great football genius of all time.
Yep.
And when watching that documentary, particularly the way he handled the quarterback controversy between Montana and Young.
Yeah, Steve Young.
Bill Walsh was emotional and made bad decisions, and like I mean, clearly the guy was a genius in some ways, but like, I actually think more and more there's this, it's like a movie.
Yeah.
There's this crazy complicated alchemy between all these different people. When they all come together just right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And you take all those people, you know, great actor or great director or great writer, and put them in different circumstances, and they don't knock it out of the park every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got it in the back of my mind that girl's bad luck.
Well, you're swell, Uncle.
It's got nothing to do with it. I love her.
Pops was right.
Yep. Well, this is a mystical movie. This is a movie in which there is good luck and there's bad luck.
Yeah.
And she is bad luck. And then we cut to her showing up in his room in a mink coat. He sits up in bed. She comes when he was in bed.
Where were you?
Oh, I was with Gus.
When a woman shows up in a mink coat to me, telling me she was with this other man that pays for all her stuff.
Yeah.
Who bets against me.
Yeah, but be honest with me. Are you really going to have this conversation with her if Kim Basinger shows up?
Oh, no, I'm not going to have the
No. You're going to think about it later.
But but I'm not going to be blind to what's going on.
He thought something happened to me last night.
And she drops her mink and stands before him naked and says,
It did.
Bang.
And now we go into the losing montage. And as good as the winning montages are, the losing montages are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. And it's made all the more unsettling because we see Roy being so happy while the team is losing.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't care. And it's like, wait, what the hell, man? You were supposed to care about baseball and care about the team and care about Pops. And you just said, I'm not going to let you take the team from Pops. But here you are indulging in your own selfish desires for Memo, and the team is struggling, you know?
And then there's this moment as they're, you know, as they lose game after game, where we see Roy going down in an elevator and the door opens and there is Harry.
Yeah.
What?
And he sits up in bed from a bad dream.
Are you all right?
Oh, yeah.
I just touched you right here.
And she had touched the scar from where he was shot.
Yeah.
It's not important, but one of my favorite yelling at an umpire moments is Pop yelling at the ump where he pulls off his glasses. Like, do you need my glasses?
Very Earl Weaver-ish. The way, if you know, Barry lived all through the Earl Weaver years, and he did stuff like that, and like the kicking of the sand and or the dust, rather, or the dirt. Yeah, it's great.
So we're heading for Chicago as the losing streak continues. We see a newspaper that says Knights at Wrigley today, and we see Iris reading the paper.
Yeah.
One thing I did not mention in our first part, which is really important to mention here, is while there is a character named Iris in the book, there is no Iris story like this in the book.
Wow.
There is no young love. There is no son. There is no woman he left behind or betrayed by Sean Harriet. That does not exist in the book at all.
Is this guy still alive? I would like to reach out to him, but like, I got to talk to you about your book.
Well, the only reason you feel that way is because of the movie.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, had you read the book in like 1959 or whatever year it came out, you probably would have gone, well, that's an interesting book about baseball.
Yeah. Boy, I hate Roy
Hobbs. But yeah, I mean, like, and the thing is the Iris story is actually the heart of the film. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Without that story, this is completely different.
Yeah.
We see her at the ticket line. We see her going into the stands. By the way, this is all shot at Buffalo All High Stadium. That's the stand-in for Wrigley Field.
Oh, yeah.
And Roy comes up to bat, and we're hearing about his losing streak, and he strikes out.
Yeah.
And we see Iris sitting in the stands. And of course, she's wearing that white dress with the white hat. And later on, when she stands up, the light is going to come streaming through that white dress and the white hat in this amazing way. Right now, she doesn't have that light hitting her. And here is why. And I didn't know this before.
Okay.
What they did was Caleb Deschanel, the cinematographer, made sure to have extras standing blocking the lights. So it's actually human. Their lights are shining in her direction.
Right.
But there are human beings blocking it so that it's not glowing at this moment.
Interesting.
Maybe you ought to try another bat.
Whatever's wrong isn't the bat.
Two things about this. One is, in the book, Pop has actually benched Roy because Roy has refused to stop using Wonder Boy during the streak. And he says, I will not play you until you use a different bat.
Wow.
So Roy is actually on the bench for much of this game.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that a dude came up to Roy Hobbs in Chicago and said, hey, my son is dying in the hospital, and I promised you would hit a home run to save his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure.
So very obvious kind of Babe Ruth kind of reference there. We're behind. Roy is in the on-deck circle. He's kneeling with his bat. Iris is watching. The music is building. And now those extras that were blocking the light of her start to move. So now you see flashes of the light hitting her as the extras move.
Yeah.
And now we got men on first and third. And there's Hobbs. He's 0 for 2. Incredible lighting on Iris. Hobbs whiffs the first pitch. He whiffs the second pitch. The crowd, of course, it's a Chicago crowd, so they're loving this. And then in this one of the most amazing moments in any sports movie ever, Iris stands up.
Yeah.
And the light hits her. And when it hits that hat, it creates like a natural halo around her head. And by the way, Iris, the name Iris, is the Greek goddess of the rainbow.
Mm.
And I also think, again, this is the thing that Redford's so great at. He does this amazing job of looking towards the stand, and it looks as if something comes into him.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the energy, the Roy Hobbs mystical power, which had fled through his relationship with Memo, has now reinvigorated him.
She's the lady of the lake.
Totally.
Right? She's the lady of the lake giving him back Excalibur, in essence.
In the book, a woman dressed in red, not white, also named Iris, stands up. But I'll tell you who this other Iris woman is. Okay. Just a random woman stands up. So Iris is watching. The way that the big hits happened before was the big downbeat, the big musical moment usually happened at the connection of the bat.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens this time. This time, as the pitch is coming, the music is swelling and building, and that big downbeat hits when the ball hits the clock. This is, for me, one of the greatest moments in any sports movie, bar none. The music is swelling. The reaction from the crowd is amazing. The reaction from Pop, Red, the batting boy, like all just moving around the stadium and seeing people react to this unbelievable hit. And particularly, there's this old guy who does this gesture that is just, I could just picture the editor in the editing room going like, oh, this is magic. That little clip is going to be great.
We're keeping that one. So this moment, Steve, was inspired by Bama Rowell of the Boston Braves, doubling off the Ebbets Field scoreboard clock on May 30th in 1946, which apparently showered the field with Dixie Walker glass. He had been promised a Bulova watch for hitting the company scoreboard sign, but didn't receive it until 1987. So that's some pretty cheap ass shit to be waiting 31 years
seriously.
to give a guy his watch. But yeah, that's what this moment was meant to evoke for those who were old school baseball fans.
Then there's Hobbs heading off to the stands because he had seen Iris, and the reporters are flashing in his eyes, and he's trying to spot her and can't quite spot her. Later on in the locker room, Dizzy hands him a card and says, "This is for you. Nice lady."
Dizzy. Nice lady.
And he sees the note of the card and ends up back at that same diner where we saw Iris before, and he walks in, sees her there. Watching this, I'm so filled with emotion at this meeting.
Yeah.
It's just one of those where it's like you've built up the backstory and you've built up all of the subtext so that every word in this scene is filled with meaning, you know?
Are you married?
What the fuck? That's such a... I always am just shocked at that first line. Like, that's what you lead with?
I don't think he's in control. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
That's where I really think... I think both of them are just like filled up with so much stuff.
Yeah.
And again, anytime there's an emotional question, good idea to just interrupt it, because up comes, Al. And I love, and she says, "Al, I'd like you to meet Roy Hobbs."
You're kidding. What do you think I ran over here for? We got Jiffy service.
It's all great.
Yeah.
They order some lemonade.
No, not married. Are you?
No. It's hard to believe someone with your looks be on the loose so long.
And her reaction to that is so filled with subtext because, and her response is,
Well, I don't get lonely.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the reason that nobody scooped her up is because she was pregnant and she had a child.
Yep.
Which is also the reason she doesn't get lonely.
Yeah.
Because she has a son.
Yeah, I mean, it's the late 1930s. How many men are trying to marry a woman with a child back then? Not many.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How is it the girls missed you?
And it's like there was one girl who didn't miss him. She shot him. You know what I mean? So again, so much subtext here.
You go to many games?
No.
So why did you come?
Oh, maybe I shouldn't have.
I'm glad you did.
What do you think as an actor of that kind of dialogue?
Oh, there's, as you said, you've got to play the subtext, right? And neither one of them are going to surrender too much. It's been 16 years since they've seen each other. He has a lot of shame because they were together when he left. Of course, he didn't know about her pregnancy, but they were together. And
Totally.
He met this woman, got tempted by this woman, and he was ashamed to ever get back in contact with Iris. But this finally was inevitable. I mean, this whole season is Roy tying up all the loose ends of his life, really. And this is a massive one, maybe the most important one, because of how it turns out ultimately. And she's very much her own woman. And in my mind, I'm watching Glenn Close play a woman that for 16 years had to raise this child, find a job, figure out, have some of the judgment from other women and other men that she never married, and she had a child essentially out of wedlock, and all the judgment that comes with that. And she persevered through all of it. And she's this adult now, and yes, when we saw her young, obviously she's still the same age, but like she's playing a younger person when we see her in the beginning of the movie. Here, this is a woman who's lived her life, and Glenn brings such a authenticity to that. And I've seen some reviews, people say, oh, she never takes him to task. You know what? Not everybody wants to do that. Some people are okay with people coming back in their lives. They've lived their 16 years, and the other person's lived their 16 years, and it's about reconnecting and having conversations. And because we all know when we're young, we do stupid stuff, and it's how we learn from that stuff, which she says later, the life you live versus the life you learn from, that makes you who you are. I mean, I reconnected with a girlfriend that I hadn't seen in 20 years. One time in Virginia years ago, and we broke up over some tough stuff. And when we got back together to have lunch, it was such a wonderful experience to look back on those days and laugh about some of the stuff and remember the affection we had for each other. And we left, friends. And those are really genuine things that are worth it. And so what we're seeing here is essentially Roy's kind of ashamed, and she's very clear about who she is, and she's not going to give him anything that she doesn't want to give him. And I kind of love that. There's a strength in that,
I totally agree. My feeling about Glenn Close's character and a portrayal of it is that this is a woman who's cried all her tears.
Yes. About the situation. Yes.
And she cried a lot of tears.
Yep.
There was a lot of tears for a certain amount of time. And that she then moved on and and this is an extremely practical person who knows exactly who they are.
Yeah.
And has found contentment after a lot of pain.
Yes. And she probably tried to reach out to him.
Of course.
When she couldn't find him and he never reached back out, she came to terms with it eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. And she went through all the anger and the regret and the blame and all that. She's past all that.
Yeah.
And what I find so interesting is her saying, well, maybe I shouldn't have. And him saying, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did is like opening a door to more relationship, more connection with her.
Right.
She goes, well, maybe we shouldn't open that door.
Well, I don't know. We're not kids anymore. Things are never the same.
I love that. Wow.
And again, she hears his subtext and says her response to the subtext,
She's essentially saying, you're going to have to earn me back into your life. It was great to see you. I came to see you because she's actually the best person in the movie.
Oh, by far.
She's actually the purest, most noble person in the movie is Iris, right? And so compared to Roy, she's so much more noble than Roy. With all his gifts and all his abilities, that's on a ball field. She's a god in the human world, outside the ball field, where it really counts in life. And her, as you said, cried out all her tears, but she's not going to be like, oh my God, it's so great to see you again. Could we be in love again? No, that isn't her approach. It's much more controlled. It's going to be at her pace. he's going to have to earn his way back in, but she does still care for him, which is why she went there. And she tells him that later when they're in the hospital, right? Because I didn't want to see you fail. She's pure.
Am I different?
Am I?
Now, we know that when someone, hey, you know, like you haven't seen them in 10 years, generally you say, you're just as beautiful as you were when I saw you, that, you know, like you haven't changed at all. That's what we normally say.
Yeah.
And when she asks, am I different? His answer is,
Yeah. A lot.
and I think it's all admiration.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
100%.
I used to look for you in crowds, thinking someday maybe you'd be there. Somewhere I stopped.
And he has a huge reaction to this. And I think inside he's going, I'm going to have to tell her. At some point, I'm going to have to figure out how to tell her. I think that's what he's thinking at that moment.
What happened to you, Roy?
And there's a long pause. And her look is so kind. You know, like I think if this had been 14 years ago, there would have been all that anger and recriminations and all that.
Probably.
And I think she's evolved past that, you know?
Well, and also the way it's shot, isn't that important? Like she is shot in much brighter light. He is in much darker light. She has nothing to hide. He has stuff he's hiding from her. So her questions come off as like genuinely asking these questions, genuinely wanting this information.
Yep.
And as you said, his narrative inside is probably, I'm going to have to tell her at some point, but he's also ashamed of what he's done.
Absolutely.
And he keeps putting his head down. If you watch the physical nature of the performance, Roy is constantly, Robert Redford is constantly putting his head down in a way as like a little bit like a dog does when you caught them doing something bad, you know? And so, and she's very clear. She leans across the table. She's the one that's very comfortable. This is her space as well. Like she says, I come here all the time. So, you know, he's in essence having to walk into her house to have this conversation.
My life didn't turn out the way I expected.
And there's so much there.
Yeah.
And then I think she makes the choice of, this has gone far enough.
What is it?
Well, I've got to go.
How come?
I just got to.
She's like, okay, we came to here. That's enough.
Right.
I'm done, you know.
Right.
And she heads out to go to the cab, and she asks him, he asked her to come to the game tomorrow.
I can't. I came today.
I see. You work?
Mm-hmm.
And that to him is a totally reasonable answer.
Yeah.
And he knows that he should let her go. And he closes the door, and then it just comes out of him, and he says, come.
Yeah.
We cut to Memo on the phone.
Hello?
This whole conversation is filled with stuff.
Surprise! It's me, Memo.
And he is not that warm to her on the phone.
Nope.
Where are you?
I'm here in my room, sitting in a white slip, thinking of you.
She's in a black dress, not a white slip, and Gus is sitting right next to watching.
Yeah.
I love the exposing of the lies that she says, yeah, I heard that you won on the radio, as we're looking at the picture of the newspaper with the photo of the woman in the white dress. And then they say goodnight, and he hangs up the phone. And after she hears the click and the dial tone, she says,
And I love you too.
and then hangs up. Do you think Gus bought that he said, like, she's trying to convince Gus that Roy said, I love you. Do you think Gus thinks that that's what happened?
No, which is why he asks her. Well, I don't know if Gus knows fully, but he senses from the overall conversation that he's not as receptive to her, which is why he asks her, are you sure you're in control or still in control, pal? And she says, yes, but I think he can tell by her body movement. He can tell by her face that she's actually developing feelings for Roy.
Yeah. Oh, you think it's because I think she just knows that Roy is not responding the way that he should.
Oh, no. I think Memo is falling in love with him. 100%.
That might be true too.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just more like I can feel Roy slipping away, you know? And then I love this construction, which is that we're in one super slow motion shot of Roy Hobbs at bat. And as he swings that one super slow motion swing, we hear the broadcaster calling home run after home run after home run after home run.
Yeah.
It's great.
4 home runs. Yeah.
Has anyone ever hit 4 home runs in a single game?
Yes.
I'm assuming they must, yeah.
Hold on. Let me take a look here while you ask that question. There have been 18 players who have ever done it.
Wow. So here's a good statistic.
Okay.
Oil City's catcher J.J. Clark went 8 for 8 with 8 home runs in a single game.
Wow.
So it could happen.
8 home runs can happen, sure.
And it's after the game. She's waiting outside at the turnstiles.
I'm glad you came.
Think what I would have missed.
That was just luck.
I know better.
Great little opening. And then he asks with a lot of vulnerability, because at this point, I think he has been building up the courage to tell her, you know?
Yeah.
Can we walk a bit?
And she says, in this lovely, gentle, and very graceful way, all right. You know, just creating the space for him, you know?
Yeah. Again, it's going to have to be at her pace, on her terms.
Yep.
And he's going to have to genuflect a bit in order to make it happen. She came. That's a big deal that she came. I love that she's wearing a pantsuit. Shout out to the costume designers, Gloria Gresham and Bernie Pollack, because the costumes in this film, her white dress is amazing. I think it's in the Smithsonian, her white dress, I think. But her coming in a pantsuit, like she's at her job and went from her job to the ball game. I love that because it conveys that, hey, she's moved on with her life and did her thing. This isn't the young, bubbly girl who was all about you back on the farm. This is a woman who is working her job in a business. And so I love that she kind of has her own space. And as they walk, this is really sweet. The way he reveals everything that happened. And she doesn't stop and yell at him or judge him. She just listens.
I met a woman on a train to Chicago. And it was a mistake.
You mean when you first left?
Yeah. And I guess that was the beginning of a lot of mistakes.
And we're hearing this as they're walking mostly silhouetted. We're not seeing their faces. We're frequently at a distance. And it's funny, it's not the same, but like the scene with Frank Galvin and Mickey when he tells her about Laura, we don't have to hear the whole conversation.
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We know that they're talking. We know that he's sharing. We don't have to hear it all.
Yeah.
And what's interesting just in the comparison is in that story, it's Mickey telling Frank Galvin about who has betrayed you.
Yeah.
And this story, it's Roy Hobbs confessing his own betrayal of Iris, you know?
Yeah. And I think going from the walking to fading into them walking more, and then fading into the shot where Glenn has stopped, or Iris has stopped, and she's looking down as Roy is telling more of his story, that gives you a feeling like she's really consuming what he's saying, processing what he's saying, and feeling bad about what he went through, right? And then they keep walking and what have you. So I like that you have this little moment where she stops and is looking down as he's, explaining more of the story. She's processing it all.
He spent years in the hospital, found out he couldn't play baseball when he got out, didn't have any money, and you get this sense of this whole 16 years of everywhere he's been and what he's done. And my guess is that Wrigley Field is many, many miles from Iris's place.
Yeah.
I think they've been walking for hours.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And we show up at her place. And again, it's totally incidental dialogue. It's not important, but the little thing about, do you want some coffee? I could brew some. Well, I don't want you to go to trouble. How about iced tea? Okay, I'll brew some. Well, then I'll just have coffee.
Who's on
Great
first?
dialogue.
Who's on first?
It's totally. And I just think about what it must feel like for her to have Roy Hobbs in her apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he asked, did you sell the farm? No, I'll always have that. Good. He says, it's home. I think that's very, very important for both of them.
Yeah.
Because it's the pastoral, it's the magical connection to the land is part of where Roy's power comes from.
It's also why she's the noble one. Because I'm sure Roy lost the farm. I'm sure Roy didn't pay a dime and lost the farm. He lost his connection to his past, right? And she keeps that foundational connection because it's important to her. Yeah.
And as she's, brewing the coffee and he's looking around the apartment, he spots a baseball and a glove.
Yeah.
And she comes out standing very, very strong and proud, I think, and says, and again, this is why Glenn Close is so good in this movie, is it's just, she's so straight in her delivery. She says,
it's my son's.
It's funny. I get emotional. This scene makes me very emotional because it's all the subtext. It's all the beauty of what's not being said.
Mm-hmm.
He means the world to me. He's a great kid.
I'll bet he is.
But before he says, I'll bet he is, Roy consumes the fact that she has a son. And Robert Redford does a great job in his face of being hurt but also respectful and sad, because this is a life that he's glimpsing that he could have had with Iris. And then he says, I'll bet he is. Like, just to kind of, reconfirm that she's an incredible person. But he does look hurt that she's done, and rightfully so, because this is something he lost by his own actions,
I'm really glad you brought this up because I think part of maybe what he does in those moments is go, who am I to judge? Like I have my own sins.
Yeah, maybe.
And then it's so fun because I can't unsee the movie. So I've seen the movie many times, and so I don't know how I felt, what I thought when I first heard the next lines.
Is he with his father?
No. His father lives in New York.
Now, my guess is I didn't connect it when I first saw it, but you easily could. A smart filmmaker, goes, wait, Roy lives in New York, and could connect it right at this moment that this is Roy Hobbs' son.
Yeah. I can't think I've ever not felt that it was his son.
At this moment.
Yeah. I don't think it was the New York thing. I think it's when she says he's at that age where I think he needs his father. And the way she's looking at him, she's not looking away, looking down, or, looking off. She's looking right at him. And so I've always kind of instinctively sensed that it was his son. And also because they have that night of sex before she leaves. So I've always just kind of
all there.
Connected. Yeah, it's all there. Yeah.
I think this is one of those cases where the audience at some point is definitely ahead of Roy. Roy has not figured this out yet.
Yeah, it seems odd that Roy hasn't figured this out. Yeah.
I guess what we said is Roy is real wise and real perceptive and real smart.
Yeah.
But where women are concerned, he has some real blind spots.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking that he needs his father now. He's at that age. I think he needs him.
Sure. That father makes all the difference.
And that that Roy Hobbs is thinking about his own father.
Yes, 100%.
In that moment.
100%.
There are few movies, I think, that are better for subtext than The Natural.
Yeah.
Because the dialogue is very spare, and there's always so much going on.
Yeah.
And they look at each other, and they embrace, and you can almost feel the pull that they want to kiss, you know?
She's the one that goes for the hug. Like, I think it's great, right? She's staring at that picture because I think all the feelings and the time comes back to her, and she stares at him, and she's missed him, and she makes. And Roy can't do this. He's not an emotionally available dude, as you said, Steve. He hides stuff. He doesn't tell stuff. He doesn't reveal stuff. So he stands there, but you can tell he's like feeling it too. The way they stare at each other, and she's gonna have to cross the divide. There's no pride here. It is just genuine affection for each other, and she hugs him. She doesn't go for the kiss. She just hugs him, which I think is great.
And then she's the one who kind of breaks it off.
Gotta catch your train.
I can stay.
I think you better go.
It's great. It's great. Again, on her terms, at her pace, when she's ready. It's great. She's in control.
I'm sorry, Mr. Boy.
I'll tell him. Roy Hobbs. He won't believe it.
And she watches him as he heads outside in front, goes across the street, and we get that perfect single tear as she watches him go.
Yeah.
All right. So Iris, the woman in red in the book, is just some woman who got obsessed with Roy Hobbs.
Oh boy.
Old, mid 30s or something. And he takes her out after the game because she did see her and she did help him break the streak.
Yeah.
And she's down to earth and kind of not totally beautiful and has more of a middle-aged body, but he still has sex with her. And then when he finds out that she's not just a mother, but a grandmother, he is totally disgusted and he completely breaks it off.
Holy shit. What is this book? Jesus Christ. What a prick. How did Barry read this book and go, you know what? There's a hero story somewhere.
That's why I'm really curious. I don't have the information of like, what was the first screenplay like? What was the second screenplay like? Yeah. What changed with Barry Levinson and what changed with Robert Redford? How did we get from there to here?
Yeah, it may just be that they want, again, it's the early 80s. You want to tell a story coming out of Vietnam. You want to tell inspiring. You want to make people believe and love America again,
Yep. And now we go into a winning montage. And I just want to point out, it's great. These things, people think because a montage takes up less screen time, that it must be easier to shoot. But in fact, it takes a ton of time to shoot, like because they have like a double plays and all this stuff. If the double play takes 3 or 4 shots, that's 3 or 4 different setups, and you have a ball bouncing around on the ground, and you have a bunch of actors who have to field it and do it right. Yeah. This all takes a lot of time and is really hard. And you have to have fans in the stands that you're moving around to make it look like you got a crowded stadium. I mean, this is all hard stuff to do.
Yeah.
I love the little, I don't know why it amuses me. The little kid, the batting boy here goes nothing. And he blows his hat. So it comes out so cute.
Great. That's such a great moment.
More wins, more celebrating in the locker room because they've tied for the pennant, and there's beer flowing and champagne, and Pop comes in and...
Hey, knock it off! Hey, knock it off! Gotta win another game before this is over. Don't jinx this. Go home, get some sleep. Knock off the booze. No booze. No booze.
And of course, it's Dizzy champagne that pops, because Dizzy, of course.
Yeah.
We hear, I think it's Barry Levinson say, the Knights simply have to win one game against the Phillies to put them in the World Series. So essentially saying they just have to take one out of these next 3 games and they're in the series, right? They don't have to win all 3 games, just one out of these 3. If not, if the Phillies win all 3, then they're tied and there'll be a 1-game playoff. And then Max gets a call.
Mercy. I'll be right over to pick him up.
And I wonder if that's the call he's been waiting for to give him more information on Roy.
That's what I think it is. That's totally what I think it is. And then we have elevator doors opening, and Roy shows up at this party, and there is Memo in a beautiful white dress.
White dress, Steve. That's on purpose.
Absolutely, 100% on purpose.
Whose place is this?
Mine? At least it will be in a week.
You must have hawked your fur coat for this.
Never. Gus chipped in.
And again, I'm like, come on, Roy.
Pitched in.
People don't generally buy extremely fancy apartments for people in New York for nothing, you know.
Out of the goodness of their heart, yeah.
Yeah. The pitcher, Fowler, I think, comes up and takes Memo away for a dance. And then there's Gus. He asks about the team, and Roy says,
they can do no wrong.
Yeah, when you're on a roll, it's like that sometimes. And when you're not, of course, every little thing gets you down. What about you?
What about me?
Well, I see you dug yourself out of that hole you're in.
Must have cost you a couple of bucks.
You're up, you're down.
So Roy knows that Gus is continuing to bet against him.
Yes, and I also think Roy knows that the pitcher now is essentially being set up, or he suspects, senses, that the pitcher is now being set up to take his spot down the road, right? She's going for the younger model.
Right.
And so there's a lot in this party that's being revealed to Roy that makes it very clear that this is like his final test or his final battle. Everything's turning against him.
And Roy asks, and Gus asks about the judge, and seems to be taking Roy's side that the judge isn't paying Roy well.
It's really nice to know a guy like you worries so much about a guy like me.
Please, please, listen, I'm just bringing it up because I know that Memo's crazy about you. I mean, I wouldn't like to see you lose her to a better provider.
And again, I'm going, come on, Roy.
I'll take my chances.
Why should you? We can all profit from these little chats. I mean, take tomorrow, for example.
Now he's straight up offering him to throw the game.
Yes.
This is not, there's nothing subtle going on here.
No.
Tomorrow, I wouldn't bet against me.
You're missing the point, kid. I already have.
That's my favorite line delivery of his. You're missing the point, kid. I already have. You know, this kind of, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it, you know.
And then we look over at Memo, because Memo is the prize. This is the prize that Gus is dangling in front of Roy.
Right.
Oh, isn't she something?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, whatever a guy would give to be in your shoes. Huh?
Roy turns to Gus and says,
you're standing awful close, Gus. I can't tell whether it's your toes I'm feeling or mine.
Oh, such a great line. I
great.
I hope someday in my life to be able to deliver that line to somebody. But listen, I know you go like, well, come on, but Roy is an athlete. Roy likes the competition. Gus is a pitcher, and Roy is essentially going to knock the ball out of the ballpark. And I think these back and forths with Gus for him are challenges that he enjoys because that's his approach. So he sees, in a weird way, he sees Gus like a pitcher that he has to outsmart in order to knock the ball over the fence. And so, yes, it seems like, come on, man, get out of the situation. But there is a temptation of Roy to be challenged and go after. As we said, Arrested Development. So in a way, he is still that teenager trying to prove himself and is willing to take on the challenge, even if he may be biting off more than he can chew, which he almost does.
Literally.
Yeah.
Good point. So I like your explanation. I think your explanation is probably correct. I also just go, this is where my brain just functions differently because I'm like, well, why are you competing for this thing? You what's wrong? Like, just walk away from Memo. Like there's nothing.
Well, yeah, he hasn't made up his mind yet, I think. But yeah. I hear you. I mean, because he literally says, "I feel your toes in my shoes. Yeah.
You bought this beautiful woman this place. You're trying to get me to throw the game and dangling her in front of me as a prize." Roy sees all of that.
Yeah.
And yet doesn't know how to walk away from it.
Well, not fully. Right. You should have left the party. You're 100% right. Should have left the party.
I misjudged your boy. I don't like being disappointed.
And then, as we've alluded to multiple times, Memo comes up to him with a plate of little tidbits of food, and she feeds him something.
Yep.
I didn't really understand that Memo had poisoned him first many times I saw the movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But clearly that is, in fact, what happened.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Does Roy ever figure out that he was poisoned by Memo?
I think he does when he says to her after she shoots the gun, "You're wrong. We have met before." It isn't just the gun. It's the fact that she was trying to affect him playing ball. So the poison, the eating of the food. And I think he has, like I said, I think he has sympathy or he has affection for Memo to a degree and probably understands that she did this because Gus made her do it, And so I don't think he has the hatred, but he never goes back to her. He never tries to entertain the notion of going back to her from this point forward.
I don't know about that. We'll see when we get to the scene in the hospital.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
We might see it differently. All right, cool.
Yeah. So I think this next section is just really well filmed, and particularly the sound, the way they play with sound, which is everyone's singing around the piano, having a good time, and they're perfectly off-tune, lyric forgetting, starting and stopping, laughing, just feels totally real. And as we're doing this, we're watching Roy, who's kind of trying to sing along and be with the party, start to wince and be in more pain. And as that's happening, the score is rising up. And the what we would call the diegetic, which means sound that is in the real space, goes away as the music that they're singing fades down, and the non-diegetic, which is the score, those are fancy film school terms, starts to rise up, and we realize, something's really, really bad is happening because Roy's in real pain.
You okay? You okay?
Where's Pop? Is Pop? What are you, nuts? Well, Savannah, I think you better get me out of here.
And they basically carry him out of the party as Memo watches.
Yeah. 3 points here. One, that's Randy Newman playing the piano, which I didn't know until
I didn't either. I didn't know that.
Yeah, until doing research for this, I didn't know that was Randy Newman playing the piano. And then when I watched it, I was like, that is Randy Newman playing the piano. 2, you see Gus look at what's happening. So the plan is in motion. And you're right to point out Memo watching him being let out. And there is a mixture of guilt for what she's done. I think it's there in her face. And so, I, again, have sympathy for Memo. I'm terrible. Maybe I'm Roy Hobbs and terrible now.
I don't know, man. Like, okay, so maybe she feels slightly guilty for poisoning this guy?
Yes.
I have no sympathy.
Okay. All right. I mean, she's a young woman who's been controlled by this man all her life, and her entire existence depends on his favor. So her poisoning Roy in order to be able to maintain her existence and not suffer whatever she might suffer from this guy, which could be complete homelessness, despondency, broke, tossed out onto the streets to possibly be assaulted, raped, hurt, beaten by men who would take advantage of her. I think there's another element going on in her thought. I think there's more going on in the thought process, but maybe, as I said, your opinion, obviously there are other people who probably feel the same way.
I actually, let me change what I'm saying, which is because me, I dislike villains who are just evil in movies.
Yes.
Yeah, that are one-dimensional. And so what you're pointing out, which I totally agree with, I find her behavior is motivatable, and her situation is shitty.
Yes.
I totally agree with that point. But she is not, I've never felt emotional sympathy for the character.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's also because, Kim Basinger's performance is weird to me.
I agree.
I find it, it's hard for me to connect with that character. I'm not like another actor in another performance might make me feel more sympathetic than she does.
I think you make an excellent point, Steve. It's why I've always said, I didn't think she was a good actress until LA Confidential. I don't like her, and I don't think she's that strong in Batman. I don't think she's strong in what is it? Naomi Nadine, whatever that was, one with Jeff Bridges. I don't think she's a strong actress until LA Confidential. Until she's put some years and some struggles and some pain, the stuff she went through with Alec Baldwin, she matured and grew as a woman, and then her performances carried much more levels and complexity. So when you see her in LA Confidential, that's a completely different actress than who you see in this movie. She's very clear about her motivations and the layers and the multiple emotions she's experiencing as she navigates her story in that movie. And I thought she thoroughly deserved the Oscar for that movie. And I never thought I would say that about Kim Basinger, So I agree with you. The performance is awkward. So, yeah.
You know what I think it just points out just about film and understanding film is that there's a difference between what you understand about what's going on in the movie and how you feel. And mostly good movies, great movies, they happen on how you feel. The movie didn't do anything. The movie made me feel all sorts of things for all sorts of characters, but it didn't at any point make me feel actual real strong sympathy for Memo. And from this super intense, I think, moment of him almost collapsing next to the piano, we cut to the classic spinning newspaper that says Hobbs rushed to hospital.
Hobbs rushed to hospital.
And he wakes up wondering where he is, and the doctor there says,
Tower Maternity, Roy. It was an emergency, and we were the closest.
I love that he looks around and there are all these pregnant women kind of looking over at the great baseball player.
We never get anything with the women. It's fascinating. None of them ever walk in. He never has any kind of interaction with them. What if there were scenes that were shot with him, like talking to these women or them saying, oh, you're my husband's favorite ball player or whatever. So it's interesting.
And then, of course, the first thing Roy wants to know is what's happened. And the doctor obviously knew that was going to be the first question. Has the paper ready?
They lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, so he's been out for days.
Yep.
So he was poisoned pretty severely. This isn't like food poisoning where you're in the bathroom all day. This was like days of poisoning, pretty brutal poisoning from Memo to Roy. And I'm not sure how much she knew about the amount that she was giving him. It's so weird. It's kind of like an up in the air thing. How did Gus know how much to give him? How did they even come up with this idea on the spot? Did they have this little hors d'oeuvre ready to go just in case Roy was an issue? I don't know about all of this. It's kind of left up in the air.
I think it's so bizarre. And I think this is why I didn't understand that she had poisoned him for so long, because it just doesn't all make sense. It's like, just for the questions you asked, it's like, well, was it Gus's plan? And what did they poison him with? And what were they actually trying to kill him? Like, what was happening here? It is weird.
Do they have a chemist on call? Yeah.
Who's just standing by? I mean, it's weird.
Am I okay to play Monday?
I'm afraid there's some bad news. The lining of your stomach has been gradually deteriorating due to a previous injury. We pumped your stomach and came up with this.
And they hand him the silver bullet.
Yeah, so why do you think he'd never had this removed?
He said he was in the hospital for like over a year.
Yeah, almost 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is it also. Again, these are I'll say it again. I adore this movie, but these are the little things where you go like, wait, what? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's good dramatic effect to see the silver bullet because it brings us back to Harriet Bird. But yeah, there's questions to be asked here in these moments.
Yes, but it could prove fatal if you continue to play baseball. Stop now, and in time, you could heal properly.
Can I play Monday?
The odds and your age would be against you. One day your stomach could easily just blow apart, kill you on the spot.
Like, holy shit. It's like a big deal. By the way, in the book, it's not a death sentence. That's like the way they're setting up in the movie is like you could die on the field.
Right.
In the book, it's like you're injured. You could probably play, but you won't play that well. You know, it's not nearly as serious. Mm-hmm. And then it's later, and in comes Memo with flowers, looking awkward. And then she says that she heard from Max and Gus that he played on Monday, it could kill him.
Now, how do Max and Gus know this, Steve?
Well, that doesn't. So that one doesn't surprise me so much. There's no question in my mind that if Max wants to find out exactly what Roy's status is, that he has people at the hospital, even the maternity ward, that he, could get someone to take a look at that chart. That one doesn't surprise me. So, by the way, this scene when they were shooting it just wasn't working at all. With him and Memo, and Redford goes to Levinson and says, "We need a rewrite." And Roger Town, who's the screenwriter, is on the set. And they go to Roger and say, "Hey, Roger, we got to rewrite this. We got to punch up this dialogue. This isn't working." I have no idea what was not working about it. And he went, "Great. Does anyone have any paper?" And according to this, doesn't make any sense to me, but this is the story. No one on the set had paper, which is completely insane because movie sets there's always paper on.
It's the 1980s, no less. Yeah,
I mean, the second AD has paper. Like this is,
no
someone has paper.
Computers.
Yeah, but he says the only paper he could get was a roll of toilet paper. So he rewrote the scene on a roll of toilet paper and handed the toilet paper to Redford.
I mean, they weren't shooting in like the middle of nowhere. No. They're shooting in a major city. I'm sure you could have sent a PA to go get you a few notebooks from the Kmart or whatever.
Listen, that's the story. I just call them like I see them.
The more interesting story, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to play, really, are you?
Would just be my last game.
And again, this is where Kim Basinger's performance, if you like it, you like it. And for me, it's just very odd.
Yeah.
Why don't we just get away? Let's just go away right now.
I've been away long enough.
I'm going to ask, so does he know he's been poisoned?
No, I don't think he knows. Like, he knows he took something at the party and it affected his body. But I think what makes him not question the poisoning or not even try to go to that place in his mind is the fact that the doctor came in and said your stomach, and this has been something that's been in your body for a long time. So this is connected to something from the past. So I think in his mind, maybe he just ate the wrong combination of things and it finally exposed what he's been hiding, which is probably his issues with his stomach for years because he hasn't wanted to get that thing pumped out of his body necessarily. Maybe he felt he deserved it to carry it around in his body as a punishment for having done. Men are, we're weird people, man. So it could be possible. And I'm adding all that. That's all headcanon. It's not in the movie, but I'm just adding that in my mind as an explanation to answer your question.
I think this movie would be better if he wasn't poisoned.
Oh, what do you think would be better?
I think, well, and I'm going to say it again. Yeah. I don't know that it's 100% clear that he was poisoned. I mean, like, it's never said. Poison's never mentioned. We see her feed him a thing, and he gets sick. Because the thing is like, if he was poisoned, the doctor would say, you were poisoned. Or the doctor would tell him more than just this thing.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is I think the doctor's in Max's pocket. Gus's pocket.
I didn't understand that.
I think the doctor is in Gus and the judge's pocket. There's no way they're going to rely on some random doctor that might give him the wrong information. I think they're in league with the doctor. As soon as they found out the maternity ward was going, I think Gus and whatever descended on him and made sure the right doctor who's been in their pocket goes and is the doctor who's watching over Roy. We don't even see that doctor treat any of the women on the ward, right? So we don't know if this is a doctor that's brought in from the main hospital to do this, to give this information to Roy, and who's going to question a doctor at the maternity ward when he's the doctor from the main hospital. That's what I think is going on here. And so he tells him, if you play, you'll die. So he's making it really clear while not going too far over the line of his ethics. He's just making it clear that he'll die. So they're controlling. And I think that's how Max and Gus get the information to pass on to Memo, is because they're using their own doctor.
Do you think it could be a lie that if he plays, he could die?
Yes, 100%. I think it is 100% a lie. I think he will hurt himself more, but he won't die But for us, it ups the stakes of the movie that he would still do this, even though he might die. It makes him even more heroic, right? As a knight, if you keep going. Because this is very similar to the Lancelot injury we see in Excalibur, right? Like, it's the old wound, my king,
totally.
the old wound, and so it's that kind of thing that's going on there.
First of all, I had never made the connection to it's the old wound and Lancelot. But oh my God, it's perfect. That's perfect. I mean, this is a knight in shining armor.
Right.
This is his great sin. This is the wound he's carrying around with him. That's absolutely perfect.
Because when people make the Percival connection, I get it. But to me, this is more Lancelot. He's more Lancelot. What's his foible? Women, right?
Yeah.
It's like Lancelot with Guinevere. That is his one blind spot. And he does it out of attraction for Harriet Bird. He does it out of attraction and maybe possibly feelings for Memo. And then, of course, in the end, it is the Lady of the Lake, who is in essence Iris, who saves him and brings him back to normal. But yes, this feels to me very much like Lancelot with a little of Percival sprinkled in.
I couldn't agree more, because Percival is the pure one who can get the Grail.
Right.
Lancelot is the fallen one with the sin that prevents him from getting the Grail.
Exactly.
The Grail in this case is to actually be the greatest person who ever played the game.
Right.
And Roy Hobbs actually isn't going to get that because of his sin, you know?
Yep.
I think so. Again, this is a weird rabbit hole, and I know we need to move out of it. But to me, it totally makes sense if the doctor is lying. But if the doctor is lying, it's less traumatic, because then he's not actually risking his life. He only thinks he's risking his life.
Right.
Anyway, enough time spent on that. But I know I introduced the whole topic.
No,
but,
I love it.
Yeah.
I know, but I know we gotta get to these moments.
Well, I have a small favor to ask. Walk away right now, and you'll live for sure. And that way we can see a whole lot more of each other.
And she takes his hand. And this is where I go back to, no, never mind. I've been in this rabbit hole too much. I'll bring it up.
I like this rabbit hole. Let's go.
Okay, well, this is where I go back to. Gus's toes are pretty close in his shoes.
Yeah.
And yet he's still letting her hold his hand, And it's still super obvious that she's even more obvious now that she's looking for Gus, because the next thing she says is,
And you won't walk away empty-handed.
What do you mean?
I mean, Gus will stake us to a lot of money. Think what we can do, Roy. With your name, and we'll make out fine.
If I skip the playoff.
now, if it wasn't obvious before,
Right.
she is working for Gus.
Yes. Very clearly. I think he knows this, but I think he wants to save her. It's some, I don't know, some confusing narrative about wanting to save her in a situation that she's in. And I think you can't deny her beauty kind of stuns him,
And the scene ends with her leaning down on him, laying her head on his chest.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, seriously, dude, what the fuck? Like, how many signals do you need that this girl is bad news? By the way, so in the book, because he's really in love with her and because he's a very different kind of person, he is just scheming, how can I get together enough money to keep her? That's what his thought process is at this moment.
Jesus.
Lights come on in the ballpark. And we hear something about practice swings and not letting Pop find out. And they're getting ready to throw a few pitches, and they know how dangerous this is. And as they're setting up for a little batting practice, Max comes out in the stands.
Yeah. The guy you like so much comes out in the stands. The question is, though, how did he know Roy is here? Did he follow Roy from the hospital? Has he been sitting outside
he is totally paid off. He paid off an orderly who said, if anything happens, give me a call.
Great point.
You got a call. Yeah.
Yep. Great point. Great point. Yeah,
And right as Roy's about to take his first swing, that flash happens because Max is taking his picture.
Yeah.
And then gets a ball and hits that ball right at Max with laser-like accuracy.
You get that, Max? Don't ever look back, Max. Ever.
And as Max runs away, Roy goes down.
Yeah. He shatters that camera, though, so he can't use any of the film.
Yep. And of course, the judge is watching all this through the slats. And speaking of the judge, it's the middle of the night, and now the light turns on, and there's the judge sitting next to his bed.
The irony that the judge turns the light on. Yeah.
I understand that you are playing.
I wouldn't want you to dock my pay.
On the contrary, I wish to augment it with a bonus.
And I love that he pulls out some money.
Yeah.
And he says,
now, as you may know, the prevailing rate for this sort of thing is $10,000. I'm offering you twice that.
John, why is that the prevailing rate?
Well, that's the Black Sox reference, isn't it? For Shoeless Joe and the other guys who took the money and threw the series. Although it was proven that Shoeless Joe did not play worse in the series than he played all season, the rest of the guys, it was very evident that there was a plot to throw that series, the Black Sox scandal.
And then he's dropped the carrot and now he's pulling out the stick because he pulls out the photographs from 16 years ago.
That's you. Nice young boy. Half-naked lady lying in the street. You in her room. Shot. Nasty business.
There are lines that stay with you. I have used nasty business, Mr. Hobbs. Nasty business. Like my entire life, whenever I've seen someone do stuff or I've been in a situation where I've made a mistake and I go, nasty business. It's just, it's such a great delivery from Robert Prosy. And I have to believe that he is imitating Comiskey. I have to believe this kind of an actor has done the research to hear about how people talked about certain asshole owners in the past during that time. And just the way Prosky adjusts his voice to play at a certain higher nasal level with this guy, I think is on purpose. And so I like the way he delivers these lines, you know.
He embodies this. He is this character. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just so perfect what he does.
Yeah.
When the judge pulls out the photos and says this, Roy's response is to say mercy.
Yeah.
What does he mean? Does he mean that it was a mercy for her to die jumping out of the window, or is he begging for mercy in this moment?
Oh no, I think I think he's saying Max Mercy. That Mercy found the pictures.
Oh, of course, that's what he's saying.
From Mercy, yeah.
Of course, that's what he's saying.
Yeah,
for my entire life. Thank you for solving this mystery. Because my whole life, I'm like, why is he saying mercy? I don't get it. And of course, that's what he's saying. Yes, thank you. Okay, good. The Cine-Files has proved its worth to me today.
Just today. By the way, the $20,000 he's offering him, it's $453,000 in today's money. $453,670 in today's money, according to this CPI inflation calendar calculator website. So that's a lot of
money,
Steve.
Now, it's a surprisingly simple procedure. You got to play your normal game, except when you are at bat, and then under no circumstances are you to hit the ball safely.
They'll beat you without me.
Without you, they lost 3 in a row.
And then he also drops the piece of information that he's got another player on the take.
Which I think is a classic misstep of a villain, right? To
totally
reveal the plans. Yeah.
No, never. You should never do that.
Yeah.
He takes the pictures and he leaves the thick envelope. And Roy Hobbs does not, in fact, say, I am not throwing this game.
Exactly.
So he
doesn't
is
give the money back.
He is still tempted by Memo. Regardless of all of my protestations, he's still tempted by her.
Well, of course, because he knows he's not going to be in the game long. This is a lot of money, a young, beautiful woman staked to a business and has a future. Now, I see if you're in your 20s, this is offensive and how could they? And I have morality to stand for. But he's a guy at the end of his line as a player. And he knows he's got his injury. The doctor just told him he might die if he plays. So the temptation of having a secure future, I don't think anybody would not consider that possibility and figure out if they can stomach it and live with themselves for the rest of their lives. So
I totally agree. Totally agree. Particularly because of what he says about the 16 years. I mean, it's the middle of the Depression.
Yeah.
You know, like he's had a hard life up to this point, scraping 2 dimes together to, you know, get a flop, as they used to say. By the way, in the book, he negotiates with the judge up to $35,000 because he's calculating that's how much money he's going to need to keep Memo happy.
Sweet Jesus.
Yeah.
That's probably $700-something thousand. Wow.
That's a lot of money. we see Max drawing a drawing of Roy giving birth to a baseball, which I think is funny. And I love the little, the team is reading cards to him.
To Roy, we love to watch you hit that ball. We cheer when you're connecting. But it really shocked us one and all to hear that you're expecting.
All really funny.
Yeah. I do love the nurse saying, think of the babies. And Diz goes, what's the issue with the babies? Like, what's the problem with the babies? It's a great line delivery for sure.
And then we see walking into the hospital is Iris. This was Glenn Close's first day of the shoot.
What? Wow.
I mean, you know, as an actor, sometimes you're called in to do the big stuff right at the beginning, which is hard.
I hate that. Yeah.
And they had the wrong wig. If you look at her hair, it's a different hair color.
Yes.
And you might notice the jaunty angle at which Glenn Close is wearing her hat.
Yeah.
That is because she has a massive zit on her forehead that the hat is covering up.
That's great.
And Max sees her, recognizes her immediately.
I saw your picture in the paper. Very nice. Roy and I go back a long way.
Which, of course, is actually true.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if you could give me a little help on this. See, I need a little help.
And man, Max Mercy, talk about a classy guy. Just like, here's pictures of Roy bleeding on the floor and a half-naked dead woman on the street. Check this out. And I like, too, that he says that this could be for Roy's defense.
Yeah.
Anything to do with like a love quarrel that you might have known her, she knew you, love triangle or something like that?
And then he laughs in just the smarmiest way.
Yeah.
Sure. But maybe I thought you might be able to help us with some little clue.
I think what Glenn Close does in this scene is so great because it is such perfect Midwestern morality is what I see, which is that she listens politely.
Yes.
She sees the pictures.
Yeah.
She knows what the pictures are. She looks at Robert Duvall. She goes, oh, I know what kind of person you are. You are an evil city person. I have dealt with many of you before.
Yeah.
I am just walking away. You are not worth my time. You know?
Yes.
That I see all of that in her performance.
Yeah. The fact that she takes the pictures and looks at them is a fascinating decision. And I don't know that she would have made that same decision if this had been shot later on. Because, of course, Roy's told her about Max. And so I don't know if she would have been necessarily, given him as much time as she gives him in this moment by stopping, looking at the pictures. And it's only when he laughs that she changes like her feeling about him, right? Initially, she's open to what he's telling her and asking her, not that she's going to help him, but she's open to listening to him. I think if this is later on in the film, because of all that Roy's told her, she just walks past him or laughs at him and walks past him, when he tries to do that stuff. So, but just my own opinion.
She walks in to see Roy, who sits up, and he says,
Doc says I have to quit baseball.
And her response is,
Why?
And it occurs to me, this is the first person who cared.
Yeah.
Like Memo didn't care about his love of baseball.
Right.
Because she don't really care about him, Yeah. Like she knows how important that is. And I think that understanding is a key factor to me.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Some mistakes, I guess, we never stop paying for.
Another line that I always use in my mind with certain situations. Yeah.
Well, this is why I can't believe I didn't think of it as the old wound, Arthur. I can't believe it never occurred to me, but it's so right on. Yeah. And because this is a movie about deep guilt. Roy has been feeling deep guilt and regret for 16 years. For 16 years, he hasn't talked to anyone about it. And now he's finally going to, because he says,
I didn't even know her.
The girl on the train.
I love that Iris has gotten to the point where she can see the young Roy Hobbs objectively, without being upset about the betrayal of her.
You liked her, didn't you?
Yes.
Because there's no point in lying anymore.
Right. And she has nothing to gain by raking him over the coals over it, right? He's going to tell her the truth. And so she's going to patiently listen to him tell the truth. And he regresses. I mean, sorry, I don't know him personally. Robert Redford does such a great job.
If you knew him personally, you call him Bob.
I call him Bobby B. But like the way he regresses to 16 years old in his mannerisms, in his speech patterns, in this scene when he's telling the truth to her is fantastic. And I know you're going to mention it, but when he breaks, I just wish my dad could have. That's the 16-year-old, bro. It is so moving what he does here. And we've been waiting for him to finally talk about this moment or talk about what happened. And of course, it has to be with Iris, you know?
Well, we're going to come back to that line about dad because that to me is the line. That's the line of the movie for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to come back to that. But what's interesting, you said she doesn't rake him over the coals. Right. Here's a piece of wisdom from old man Steve.
Yeah.
Is there is no reason to rake someone over the coals when you can tell they've already raked themselves over the coals for years.
Yes.
Roy has put himself through his own purgatory.
Yeah.
Nobody else needs to do that to him, you know?
Right.
In fact, he's still there because he says,
but I didn't see it coming.
How could you possibly know she'd hurt you? I mean, how could anyone?
I didn't see it coming.
You think you should have?
Yes, but I didn't. Why didn't I?
Those words have been playing in his head for 16 years.
Yep. The guilt and the guilt and the shame of it all. And the fact that like he sees it like a baseball, I should have seen that pitch coming and I didn't. And he struck me out in the big game. So in essence, her shooting him is the pitch he didn't see, which knocked him out for 16 years. And that's how he sees it because everything is through the prism of baseball in his mind. You know, I should have seen it.
And she says, and this connects to another piece of advice from old man Steve.
You were so young.
My piece of advice is when we look back at the mistakes we made in our youth, we tend to think about them with the wisdom we've gained in older age.
Yes.
Instead of forgiving ourselves for being just as young and stupid as all the young and stupid people we see walking around now as when we're old men, you know? It's like, you were young.
And I'll take your advice one step further because I agree with your advice. And that is, as old people, we also have to remember when we're looking at 16-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 26-year-olds, the mistakes they're making are the mistakes we made. And we have to work really hard to create grace for them. Because I know, for me, I watched this reality show called Love is Blind on Netflix. And I'm watching people in their 20s and 30s trying to meet people through walls without seeing their faces and then getting into these relationships. And I sometimes can slide into like, what were you thinking? Why would you do this? Why did you say that? And then go, oh, right. Because that's what you do when you're that age most of the time. Those are the mistakes you make. Those you can't see the perspective. And so I have to stop my perspective now and remember what it was like then and see them through a different prism. And it's really hard to do because, I mean, we love to judge as we get older, but it's also essential to create grace when grace is merited in situations. And especially when Roy is about to reveal and open up about the situation, the last thing Iris should be doing is yelling at him or raking him over the coals over it because he'll shut down.
Things sure turned out different.
In what way?
And this is the other voice that's been playing in his head.
For 16 years, I've lived with the idea that I could have been the best in the game.
You're so good now.
I could have been better. I could have broke every record in the book.
Because, and this is what we've been talking about this whole time, is he's still that young kid.
Yep.
That young kid he's not gotten past that thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Like I said, Arrested Development, like I've been saying. Yeah.
Because she's like, and then, which is actually what Harriet Bird asked him. And he has the exact same answer.
And then when I walked down the street, people would have looked and they would have said, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was in this game.
What I see again, what I'm reading in Glenn Close's performance, is that she takes that in and sees in that the young man that she was in love with, or the young man that she loved, you know?
Yeah.
And then she lays her own bit of wisdom on him.
You know, I believe we have two lives.
And I think Roy sits up and realizes there's something really important here, you know?
What do you mean?
The life we learn with, and the life we live with after that.
So let's just stop there.
Yeah.
Let's just stop with that line.
Sure.
What do you think of that?
I love that. It's so, I never got this until I got older. I never got this exchange fully until I got older. Because when you're young, you're 16, you're 17, what do you know about the life you learned with, the life you live? This is an important piece of wisdom. And I think this is why she is so much more mature and adult and wiser than Roy at this stage. Because Roy has been stuck beating himself up for that one mistake when he was a teenager, right? 17, 18 years old, going to the Mets organization for 16 years. She has dealt with the loss of Roy and the fact that she gave herself to Roy, got pregnant. She kept her child, and raised her child. And so she's been through the wars of all of that. And she has become a better person, learning from the experiences rather than beating herself up. It's a very difficult thing to do. I beat myself up constantly. And so it's very hard to create the space of like, okay, what have I learned from here? And what can I take that into the next experience? And it's important that we do live that life learning from the mistakes rather than beating ourselves up from those mistakes. And because everyone makes mistakes,
Well, I think for me too, when you're in the learning process, you have an image of what your life is going to be.
Yes.
And you are learning to succeed in that image of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you end up in a life that's entirely different
Oh, yeah.
from the one you were training for, the one you thought you were heading towards.
Yeah.
Like I always think, the John Lennon line, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
Is that, this is what the world is. This is where you live now,
Yeah. That's the hardest thing for so many of us who are dreamers is when we don't achieve the thing we thought we could achieve for our own reasons or situations or we weren't good enough. That's the hardest pill to swallow for a lot of creatives is you just weren't good enough. And you have to find another life or another path to walk. And I think for me, it came when I saw that movie and I realized, you know what? I'm not the strongest actor and I'm not going to achieve the things that I want to achieve. So this path opened up for me of podcasting and being a pundit and movie critic. And I've enjoyed it for the most part. And it's been a nice change. But it certainly is the hardest thing in the world to accept when you realize, okay, this is not my path anymore. I have to find a new path or a new path has presented itself and I will explore it, because as Roy says, that's not the life I had envisioned. And he thinks that he cost himself this life when in fact it was this woman who manipulated him and put him in a situation and essentially as an older person was able to manipulate a young, innocent mind to be in a position here to be shot in this way. It's not his fault. It really isn't, which is the hardest thing to accept for him.
Exactly. And if you'll forgive me for saying this, I would probably put it differently from you. I think you're a very solid actor. I think that you are exceptional at doing this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I totally think you are as good as many, many working actors out there in the world,
Yeah, but I didn't want to be a working actor.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah. That's what Roy's talking about.
Yeah.
Roy wanted to be the star, not just a great ball player. He wanted to be the greatest. And that is the hardest thing.
And Roy thinks for a minute. And then again, I love how Robert Redford makes these. You can see him make the connections in the silence,
That day in Chicago, why did you stand up?
Her line is wonderful.
I didn't want to see you fail.
And then there's a long pause. And this is this line we were talking about before. He says,
I wish Dad could.
And then I can see the ellipse in the script.
Yeah.
It says ... And there's this pause. And again, as we said throughout this whole thing, Redford's ability to make you see his thought that he's thinking. Yeah. And then he says,
God, I love baseball.
What is in that pause? What is it? Like, what do you see happening here?
Well, with the dad line, I love that he doesn't finish it. I think it's great. We know, right? Especially if you see it later and you've lost your father. This feeling so deeply in your bones, man. I just wish my dad, there are so many things over the last, 16 years since my father passed, which is crazy to think about, that I wish my father had been around to experience and certainly to meet Lindley. It would have meant the world to me for him to have this relationship. But that's just how life is sometimes. And so, but then when he says, God, I love baseball, that to me finally is Roy like, dropping all the walls, dropping the barriers, and just speaking honestly about the game and what the game means to him. Because people will always ridicule you about the things you love the most. They won't see it the way you see it. And you have to embrace that, And look, it's stupid. It's a really small thing. With the Schmodown, I can't tell you how many people ridiculed me for playing that game, loving that game as much, that committing so much of myself. How many people on the production team would ridicule us who played the game because they were snarky, sarcastic sacks of shit who thought they were and thought we were ridiculous for caring about it so much. It's just movie trivia. It meant so much more to people, and I could show you so many, DMs I got from people who said, like, you kept me going, following your story. I didn't take my life. Like, there was so much involved in that people don't understand on the production side of things because they never got those emails or mail or DMs. And it's important. And with Roy, that's what he's saying. God, I love it. The game itself is his life. And there's just so much about it that is tied to his connection with Iris, to his dad, to his whole life is seen through the prism of baseball. And because he loves it, and he loves it in its purest form. And that's the thing. I think if Iris doesn't show up, Roy maybe takes that money and maybe goes with Memo. But Iris showing up, bringing him back to that place and having him confront these things, I think God, I Love Baseball is him coming back to center to make the right decisions going forward for the rest of the movie.
I mean, so much of this movie is about purity. And the thing that you just brought up that I think is so spot on is the purity of his love of the game and how connected it. I mean, there's we could finish because anytime as a screenwriter, anytime I write ... I am telling the actor, you were thinking of saying something.
Yeah.
But a thought has come into your mind that has interrupted that. And now you're not going to say that.
Right.
Which means there's this wonderful collaboration between a screenwriter and an actor, even if they've never met.
Yeah.
Where the screenwriter, I'm not going to tell you what it is that you're not saying.
Yeah.
The actor is going to come up with that. And then as a director, like if I were working with you, I probably wouldn't ask you, what are you not saying?
Right.
Because I want you to have that. But I'd certainly discuss it with you in terms of like what's going on here. And I think there's so much of, I wish my dad could have seen the man that I became. I wish my dad could have seen me playing for the Knights, playing professional baseball, hitting those home runs. I wish my dad could have seen that I didn't quit. Like, because remember, Dad said your talent's not enough.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't get back here just with talent. He got back here through a lot of grit and determination. I wish all of those things. And the fact that he doesn't finish it, because I think when his love of baseball before Harriet was just pure. Yeah. And the world was reflected in the game. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like he thought the world was like baseball, like you just put all your effort into it, you do it with your whole heart, and then that's how the world responds to you in kind. And what he found out was the world is not like that.
Yeah.
But baseball is still like that for him in his mind, in the purest version of himself,
I would put this, and I thought people might get mad at me for saying this, I would put this in the league with the entire speech that James Earl Jones delivers about baseball in Field of Dreams. Just the way he says, God, I love baseball. It is everything to him. And James Earl Jones speaking about the power of baseball. I think the two sentiments in both of these, one line and an entire speech, the sentiments are similar. Brothers, shall we say, in their feelings about the game and the importance of baseball.
Well, and I think too, there's something important about, and I don't know if people listening to this feel this way. For me, it's really good to have things that become your metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Like martial arts has always been one for me of like, that lessons that I learned on the mat are lessons I take out into life. Yeah. And I think for Roy Hobbs, baseball is at the center of his identity and how he sees the world, and what life is about,
Yeah.
And that's why he's got to go play. And this is why Memo doesn't understand,
Yeah, of course.
Because when he tells Iris, they say I have to quit baseball, she goes, why? Because she understands how central this is to this person.
Yeah, to his core. Yeah.
You gonna go to the game tomorrow?
Yep.
Is your son with you?
He is.
And there's so much here. And just like we talked about before, right when they're in their middle stuff, good time for the nurse to come in, you know?
To break up the...
Yep.
Yeah, it's so smart.
Do you think she was thinking of telling him?
Yes, I think she was close to telling him. And the nurse came in at the right time. And the way she says, well, I got to go. You know, like this is like, she's not ready to tell him. And I think he suspects, but until she says it, he doesn't 100% know.
Right.
So it's great. And for us as the audience, it's like, so it's great to keep us on the edge of our seat on this.
So back to the book. Remember the Iris in the red dress who he saw in Chicago that he later slept with and then found out she was a grandmother and hightailed it away?
Yeah.
Well, Iris had sent him a letter, which he received before going into the hospital, which he never opened because she was a grandmother, but he kept it with him. And while he's in the hospital, because there is no Iris that he fathered a child with that he was in love with, that person doesn't exist.
Right.
He's sitting in the hospital. He's visited by Memo, and he pulls out the envelope with the letter and decides to read it. And as he's reading it, he goes, wow, this really is a cool person. She's really great. Maybe I shouldn't go with Memo. This person is down to earth. I feel a real connection to her.
Right.
I don't need to take all this money to support her. And then at the end of the letter, Iris mentions something about her granddaughter, and he crumples up the letter and throws it in the corner.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, Roy Hobbs of the book. You're such an asshole. Time for the big game.
Yeah.
All the build to it is great. The chalking up of the fields, and we see Pop cross the name of Roy Hobbs off his batting list. We're up in the judge's office with Memo.
I want Pop Fisher out of here, bag and baggage.
That's right. Lay it all on the line, Harry. All of it. That's right. You heard me.
And then Roy comes into the office.
Yeah.
And of course, now Roy sees Gus and the judge and Memo all in the office together. Yeah.
You dropped this on your way out.
And puts the envelope on the desk.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Hobbs, but we had a deal.
They offer him more money and ask what he wants. And Roy says,
to hit away.
I thought I could rely on your honor, Hobbs.
You're about to.
I love you're about to. It's great. And then they pull out the blackmail. They pull out the photos.
Yeah.
And I love that he says, I don't care.
He's confronted this now. He's accepted it. The power of Iris's regressing him back to understanding what's great about the game, what really matters about the game, and that people will still remember her. She says that to him. Remember, she says, they're going to remember you. They're going to remember you. The kids, all the things you've done for the kids. And so this is Roy finally taking a stand here as strongly as possible to all three of them in the room in different moments, you know, and which is totally flustering the judge, which Prosky does a great job. But aren't you forgetting something? You passed. You know, this is so great the way he does it. And when Roy rejects it, go ahead, call Max right now, call the press. This is a great thing that Prosky does. He wings to Gus to show Gus the pictures as if like, help me, Daddy. It's great. It's so great. So it lets you know that Gus is really the architect of all of this. It was never the judge. The judge, not that he escapes any blame, but the judge was influenced by Gus to do all of this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what Roy I think he's gotten a little piece of Iris's deep wisdom.
Yes.
Like Iris went through a time of regrets and blame and anger and shame. You know, she was an unwed mother in this era. Like she went through, and then she went, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Right. And that's where Roy is now. Like he's been hiding from this whole time. And now he's like, I don't need to hide anymore.
Yeah.
And while all this is happening, we see a gun drawn.
The gun is in the drawer. That's right. Yeah.
That's in the drawer. And then we hear a gunshot. Redford, I think totally plays I was full PTSD taken back to that moment where I was shot.
Yes.
You bastard.
And he looks at that smoking gun. And as Memo says she hates him, he walks slowly forward, takes the gun from his hand and says,
You were right, Memo. We have met before.
Yeah. Great line. Great.
And I think it's cathartic for him.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think stepping through the moment with the woman in black with the gun and facing her down is important for Roy Hobbs.
And not only that, the symbolism of disarming her, which in essence is saying this memory can't hurt me anymore. Like I'm disarming this memory from hurting me anymore. taking the gun out of her.
Exactly.
Which would have burnt his fingers, by the way. But whatever. What's your thoughts on why she pulls the gun? Clearly, Steve, I don't think you can deny that she has feelings for him, right? That's why she pulled the gun? Or do you think she's mad at him because it ruins her future, blah, blah, blah? What do you think?
So I don't know that I've ever said that I don't think she has any feelings for him. I think there are some feelings there, but I think it's much more the latter. I think it's we had a sweet deal. We were going to get $400,000 in today's dollars, and buy into the company, and Gus was going to take care of us, and that was going to be my future. And you just fucked it up. That's more what I see.
Yeah,
but she is emotional, you know.
I think she has feelings for him, and she had maybe thought of a future with him climbing out of this hell. But like he said, some mistakes she never stopped paying for.
But frankly, what I really think is that they wanted Roy to have this moment of facing the woman with the gun.
100%. Yeah.
That's what I think it's barely motivatable for her, particularly because she shoots in the air. She doesn't shoot him.
She shoots down into the ground.
Or shoots down into the ground, I mean.
Yeah.
And then Gus goes,
You're a lot weaker than I thought. What do you think this changes?
Why don't you have Max draw your picture? You can read about it in the morning paper.
You're yesterday's news, kid. You had a great gift of talent, but it's not enough.
Which is literally exactly what Dad said at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
Roy heads out.
With his insides, he's as good to us now as he was before. Besides, we're $20,000 richer.
He has rattled Gus again.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. Gus saying that, I think you're a loser. These are wasted words on a man who believes in himself because there's nothing you can say all the crap you want. It's irrelevant. He knows what he's going to do and he knows what he's capable of and he's going to do it. And so, but Gus has nothing else but words at this point to hurt him. And so he tries to reassure the judge and the $20,000, but it's all rationalization because Roy has outwitted him again.
Red, I wanted to win that pennant worse than I wanted any goddamn thing in my life, and you'd think I could just this once, wouldn't you?
I love Wilford Brimley.
No, he's so good. Yeah.
Nobody can do Wilford Brimley except Wilford Brimley.
I agree.
And I'm sure even to this day, there's casting meetings where they're saying, we're looking for a Wilford Brimley type. That must happen all the time.
Well, maybe I'll put on 30 more pounds and grow a beard.
You got to get the mustache.
You got to get the mustache and those little glasses.
I'd have walked away from baseball and I'd have bought a farm.
Nothing like a farm.
And there is Robert Redford standing, looking perfect, and the unbelievable edge light that's it's like the light that goes through Iris's hat in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's how much his hair is glowing at this moment.
Right.
Nothing like being around animals. Fix the thing. There's nothing like being in the field by yourself with the vegetables and the corn, the winter wheat, the greenest stuff you ever saw.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, man, and part of it is any mentions of dads is going to get me emotional anyway.
My mother told me I ought to be a farmer.
My dad wanted me to be a baseball player.
Well, you're better than anyone I ever had. And you're the best goddamn hitter I ever saw. Suit up.
That's also Pop coming full circle, right?
Yeah,
Finally telling
totally.
Roy how much he values him,
It's later on, we're in the locker room. Max comes in, sits next to Roy.
They come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go. I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna be around here a lot longer than you or anybody else around here. I'm here to protect this game.
Whose game?
Which I think is a great line.
Yeah. I do it by making or breaking the likes of you.
Which is so because he made the whammer. We talked about that in our first part.
Yep.
I bet there are a whole bunch of other sports people who he made, and I bet there are a whole bunch of other people who he broke.
Yep.
Because they didn't fit whatever the Max Mercy ideal is, or they didn't play ball, both the game itself, but also with people like Gus, the way Max Mercy wanted him to.
Yeah.
And then Roy asks,
did you ever play ball, Max?
And watch Duvall on this, because what's so great, it's such an obvious question, but it's very clear that to Max Mercy, it's a totally bizarre question. It never occurred to him before.
No, never have. But I make it a little more fun to watch, you see. And after the day, whether you're a goat or a hero, you're going to make me a great story.
I think he gives those lines to a sports writer. I think that's the film or Levinson making a commentary on sports writers who think too much of themselves,
By the way, have you thought about the fact, it only occurred to me doing research for this movie when I came to this line, that back in the 30s and 40s, being the GOAT was being the worst player on the field, the one who ruined everything. And today, being the GOAT is being the best, the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
You know,
because of what it means. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scapegoat, that kind of thing. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. So there are over 600 shots in this final game. Wow. It is unbelievably complex what they had to do in terms of continuity, in terms of editing. I mean, this is hugely difficult. It's all night shoots. It's very cold. They're shooting in September in Buffalo. So it's cold. They have 6,000 extras and they have to move them around because they can't fill the stadium. So it's like, okay, we need all the extras over here. We need all the extras over here. And it's 3 a.m. and it's cold, and these extras are desperately trying to sneak out of the stadium and go home.
And I guarantee you these are non-unit extras that are probably getting $50 at most. Or a meal, a box meal or something.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember, I don't have any stories about this, but I remember what they did for Hoosiers was they had like a big contest, and it's just had a local people. They weren't paying anybody anything, you know?
That's true. That's possible too.
So the Knights take the field, and we hear the announcer saying that everyone's worrying about Roy Hobbs. And we also see Iris and her son watching the game.
Yeah.
The Knights are out in the field. There's a long fly ball. Hobbs catches it, but he limps as he throws the ball in. Yeah. All these little signs that things aren't so good. In the dugout, like another sign he's not so good, he's sitting with his jacket on, and you see Pop look over at him, and Pop knows he's hurting.
Yeah.
So Hobbs is up first at bat. Iris is watching, and you can even see he's wincing just kind of doing his warm-up swings.
Yeah.
He misses completely on the first pitch.
The pitch. Inside corner, strike 2. And that crowd was not happy with the pitch. It was excellent call.
Yeah, it was an excellent call. You're right. Yes.
And strike 3. He's out on 3 pitches. Yeah. Fowler's been pitching great.
Yeah.
Perfect control. And then Fowler looks up towards the lights, and Hobbs sees him do that. And then there's a pitch, and he hits a home run over Hobbs's head.
Yeah.
And now Hobbs looks up where Fowler had been looking, and what he sees is the dark office where he knows the judge is.
Yeah.
Hey! Crowd as 2 runs goes time! Board. Wait a minute, this is a little unusual.
This never happens, by the way. Outfielders almost never call a timeout with a pitcher. It's usually infielders or the catcher. So the fact that he does this is so unusual. So him running, because it takes all that time to run to the pitcher's mound. And I love this interaction between them. You know, he's basically saying, don't do this. And he's saying, you know, I'll start pitching when you start hitting. He puts it on the table to Roy because he thinks Roy's in on it as well because Roy's striking out, you know.
It's so because of course we know that Roy was really trying to hit.
Yes, right.
And I love that Pop comes out.
Yeah. What the hell's going on out here?
It's a surprise.
It's okay, Pop.
Let's play ball.
Let's play ball then. Yeah, damn it.
Now the Knights are up to bat again. Hobbs comes up, dusts his hands off. Kids are watching, and it's 3 swings. And not only is it 3 misses, but on the 3rd swing, Hobbs goes down to the ground.
Yeah.
So he's looking in pain.
Kind of like he did when he was hitting those shots to Mercy. You know, he's hurt down the ground. Yeah.
And that's when Iris gets up. Yeah. She goes to the usher.
I'm sorry, you just can't do it.
I know you don't, but you must understand. I have his son in the stands. He doesn't know his son is here.
I just can't do it.
So if you didn't get that this is Roy Hobbs' son, if you missed all the clues up to this point, at this point it is official. That's Roy Hobbs Jr. in the stands there.
Yeah, and I know this is something people complain about nowadays, but certainly every once in a while, white lady privilege comes in handy, and certainly her because she does eventually manage to convince this guy because we see him bring the note to a dude on the field who hands it to one of the guys in the dugout who hand it to Roy. So, you know, sometimes it can be an effective thing, especially in a movie. So, you know, because he's very clear that he can't help her. And it is, I think, is a super rare thing to be able to convince an usher to put a note down there, for God's sakes, you know.
I first of all, white lady privilege, very funny. But I also think what it really is nice lady privilege.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yes, because she radiates that pureness, of course.
Yeah. And it's now the 6th inning, and we watch that usher hand that note off to a cop. It goes down through the dugout, gets handed to Roy. Great choice that he doesn't actually look at it right away, because it makes us go, look at the note, Roy. Then he looks at it and he reads it. And another great choice, which, again, I would never have thought to do this because it seems wrong, which is when he's reading it, his head is down and he's wearing a baseball cap. So it totally blocks the top half of his face, particularly his eyes.
Yeah.
And you go, why would we not want to see his eyes in this incredible moment? And yet it actually works so much better that we don't see his initial reaction.
Yeah.
The music hits and we see Redford again thinking, I'll stop making a point of it, but he's so good at it. And he steps up out of the dugout and he looks out into the stands and just sees out of focus faces. So he doesn't see Iris and his son, but now he knows that they're there. And he's just walking back and forth as he's processing this moment. Now the 9th, and there are 2 outs.
A couple of hits here. The guys get on base. They're on 1st and 3rd, I think. And now Roy steps up as the possible winning run here, bottom of the 9th, you know?
The construction of all this is so great. It's beautifully, beautifully edited. In particular, things like the sound design, as the camera moves around to different shots, their audio pops out just a little bit more, and you can see in the mix, that's this thing. It makes you feel so much like you're at this game, you know?
Yeah.
The first pitch is an inside pitch to backs Roy's up, and then Pittsburgh calls timeout.
He's going to go for a left-hander. Young John Rhodes strides to the mound. Nebraska farm boy, blazing left-handed speed.
Which, according to you, we already met him outside the train when Roy threw him the ball.
I mean, I'm guessing. I'm just guessing. It could be a nice little thing. So, yeah. But he walks up, the silent assassin, Nebraska farm boy. He's massive, this guy. And they shoot him from below. Yep. Barry does, which is great, with the lights behind him and in slow motion, and you hear the music hit. So now he's come to face maybe himself, a younger version of himself. This kid, as the announcer says, coming in with all this fanfare. So in essence, this is Luke in the tree. He's got to face himself and come out the other side. It's the last thing he has to do here in order to close all the loops here of his past and move on to a new future.
Determination, trying to make it happen, trying to accomplish the dream. The pitch.
And he hits it, and there's a shatter of glass because he foul-tipped it up to Max's window.
That is great.
All right. I do have to keep telling you about what happens in the book.
Oh, my God.
In the book, Roy has been throwing, the first at-bats, he struck out on purpose.
Yeah.
So, because he's throwing the game. And then he hits a foul tip into the stands, and it hits someone in the head. It hits Iris.
Oh, my God.
The woman in the red dress, grandmother, has come to this final game.
Oh, my God.
And it has hit her in the head, knocking her out.
Oh,
Roy runs into the stands, cradling her body as she comes to, and realizes that he is, in fact, in love with her. This is better. The movie
fuck was wrong with this guy?
The movie is better.
What were you working out, man?
Well, I've now read this book 3 times. But never again. I will not be ever reading that book again. But he has made contact with the ball. I love, by the way, that there's a guy who pops out of the scoreboard window with his binoculars.
Yeah.
Just as lightning strikes, and you're like, oh, lightning. This is the magic. Hobbs is feeling the magic. And now we have the next pitch, and he hits a foul ball. Running off the first, a lot of power. And now I'm going to say a thing I've said in almost every single sports movie we've ever done, which is they said, man, Robert Redford could really hit the ball. He had a few out of the park. He was a great athlete, a really great hitter, and this is really him hitting the ball. And you could take that with as many grain of salts with Kevin Costner and all the other athletes we've talked about, or gunslingers, or just they were really good at this. Well, maybe he was. I'm not saying he wasn't, but that's almost always what's said in these movies.
Of course.
Yeah. And
Actors then these magical beings. Yeah.
And as he turns around from first base to walk back to home, he looks down, and there on the ground is a broken Wonder Boy.
Yeah.
Excalibur has been broken. Bobby, the bat boy, runs out and they pick up the pieces.
Go pick me out a winner, Bobby.
Okay.
It's as classically baseball as we could possibly be at this point.
And it's great also because that is the bat from the past now.
Yep.
He's about to embrace a new future. And this bat that he's going to get is the one he worked on with Bobby earlier. Great plant, Steve. Great plant to have it come into fruition here. And of course, because, Bobby is the innocent kid who respects and loves Roy, which is what Roy always wanted. So to use Bobby's bat to do this, to win this game is incredible.
So one of the things that happens when you make a film is that, in particular when you edit a film, is that you expand or compress time.
Yeah.
So frequently, if we're doing a movie in which a guy has to walk 2 miles and it takes him, 30 minutes to walk the 2 miles or 40 minutes to walk the 2 miles, I'm not going to spend 40 minutes of the film showing him walk those 2 miles.
Right.
I'm probably going to spend 10 seconds of the film showing him walk those 2 miles. So I compress time. Other times you expand time. This one at bat is almost 9 minutes long. Like it really shows all the details.
Wow.
Now, obviously, at the end of the World Series of a 3-2 pitch game, an at-bat can take a while.
Yeah.
But this is definitely, it's the way it's showing you every single detail and really stretching things out. That's part of what makes this all so dramatic. And now it's just going to get the Savoy Special with Bobby, the Bat Boy, is just hugely dramatic. They take it, there's photos of it, the cheers are building. He gets back into the batting box, and then he winces and bends over.
Roy, are you all right, fella? Let's play ball.
And then there's this look from the catcher, who for some reason has been the catcher in many, many games in this movie, looks up and sees bloodstains on Roy's side.
Yeah.
And he sees this as an advantage. You know what I mean? In the book, after Iris has been knocked out, he does decide to hit away, and he strikes out.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yep.
The mighty Casey has struck out.
But that is not what happens here.
No.
There's slow motion of the pitch. And again, slow motion has mostly only been used on Roy Hobbs. The fact that it's used on this pitcher is another sign that this is him facing his younger self. As the pitch starts, the crowd sound starts to fade down and the music fades in. We see the shot from behind Roy as he starts his swing, then the close-up of the ball coming straight towards camera, and then the connection, the ball, it sounds like a cannon. The ball's flying, and again, where sometimes we had the downbeat of the music happen on the connection, here the build is still happening, and music is building and building. And I love that one of the vendors, selling beers or whatever, he mouths, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
Very clearly an "oh shit," but we don't hear it.
Right.
And then, it's like we've knocked the cover off the ball. We've hit the ball into the rafters. We've shattered the clock at Wrigley Field. And we're going, how do we outdo that? And it hits the light, which explodes in a blast of sparks. And for some reason, that triggers every light in the stadium to explode with like fireworks and drop glowing ash all over, it's just totally insane. And it is amazing.
What an ending, man. I mean, if this movie works for you, that moment works for you every single time. Just him knocking that ball so hard and swell of emotion and release that it gives you. And then it goes back to that kind of magical thing of where all the sparks are flying. It is almost a sense of like just relief, right? And release of it all, of the pain. And that Roy, a guy we've come to love through the film, does get his moment, does get his massive, does get a memorable thing. No matter what they release, if they release those pictures, none of that is going to matter.
I love there's like an incredible low angle shot of Roy running the bases with those explosions in the background. It's absolutely stunning.
He's not celebrating. He's not yelling. He's very calmly running around the bases like Ted Williams used to run around the bases with his head down. We see the judge and Gus and Memo looking at him as he runs the bases, knowing that their future of owning the ball club is over.
Amazing shot of Pop with the sparks reflected in his glasses.
And then the players, all the players lining the field as the sparks are flying onto them, celebrating because Roy's given them the joy. He's brought joy back to the land, right? Like the Grail It is back now. King Arthur is back on the seat. Lancelot has done it. Everything is better in the world. And Pop has that great handshake with Red that's just awesome. And Steve, you're so right. Seeing this almost childlike joy in his face as he sees the sparks in his glasses and everything. It's so great. And then cutting to the ball flying through the air, because this is a magical movie. This is a fairy tale. This is an Arthurian tale.
Well, and this is why we actually don't need any dialogue. We don't need anybody to say, and this is what happened, and Gus got arrested, or, Pop got it doesn't matter. None of that matters, because we've seen everything kind of wrapped up visually in this last moment. And then it takes such a strange turn, because it's as things are getting darker and we're just seeing these sparks falling, we're now watching this ball and we're like, what is this ball? It's not the ball that he hit, that hit the lights. So what is this ball flying through the dark? And it's flying through the dark, and then it kind of becomes the light. And then we see that we're sort of back where we started, in this farmland, in this beautiful hour, and the ball is flying. And at the beginning of the movie, it was young Roy Hobbs that caught it. And now, of course, it's Roy Hobbs's son that catches it. Iris in that simple dress, watching and smiling. Again, it's shot at golden hour, and Roy Hobbs just playing catch with his son, looking, let's face it, perfect.
Yes.
And we play a little bit of catch, and it's just that father and son moment, and then that is the end of The Natural.
And the way it ends, and even the body position of Glenn Close standing there with her arms like folded, watching this, and the way her dress is fitting on her. She is very much what we would see as a stereotypical farm wife there, and watching with such joy, but she stands tall with strength. And Roy looks relaxed for the first time ever. Roy's smiling with this relaxed feeling, and he's happy. And this whole life has brought him back here. And what has been the question that both Harriet and Iris asked him, which is, and then what? This is, and then what? This is more important. He has found joy with the woman he loves. He has a young son that he's raising that's his own, and he's back on the farm where he was the happiest. And it's great. It's such a great ending to this movie.
John, would you like to know how the book ends?
Oh, sure. Why not? We might as well finish it off. Go ahead.
So in the book, they basically realize that he was throwing the game. Yeah. They get evidence of it. He's banned from baseball. Now he realizes in his inner monologue, and he didn't make any money, that he basically suffer for the rest of his life. That's his inner monologue. Now I have to suffer for the rest of his life. Wow. And a young kid comes up to him and says, "Say it ain't so, Roy." And he tries to answer. He wants to lie to him, but in the end, he just covers his face and bursts into tears.
Wow.
And that is the end of the book.
Jesus Christ, dude. Well, that's a 1970s book. That's a 1970s film. And of course, Saint Ain't So is a reference to Saint Ain't So Joe, which is the Shoeless Joe thing, Jackson thing. Yeah.
So in post-production, it was super, super rushed. They didn't have a lot of time. They're editing round the clock. And I don't know how this happened this way, but as they're editing, they had Randy Newman was in the next room with his piano banging out the score. And they start to listen to what's happening in the next door and going, oh, this is going to be something special. And it sounds like just hearing Randy Newman's score coming together was helping them edit the movie in terms of its tone and its pacing and just the beautiful Americana of what Randy Newman was doing. Yeah. Baseball movies had not previously done well. This was released on May 11th, 1984. And Barry Levinson goes to the Bruin movie theater in Westwood to just kind of see how things are going. And he shows up at the theater and he sees a whole bunch of people walking out of the movie. And he goes, oh, shit. And they're going up and asking for their money back. And he's going, oh, my, I thought we made something good. Oh, my God, what's happened? And he goes and he asks and he finds out that something was wrong with the projector and the film kept breaking. And that's why everybody was walking out. So he's like, oh, thank God. Oh, my Lord. It did well at the box office, but a lot of reviewers dinged it because it didn't follow the book.
Yeah, of course. Jesus.
It had 4 nominations. It had for Best Supporting Actress for Glenn Close, Cinematography for Caleb Deschanel, Art Direction, of course, Music for Randy Newman. This is the year of Amadeus.
Yeah, good luck.
Peggy Ashcroft won Best Supporting Actress for Passage to India. Lindsay Krause was nominated this year for Places in the Heart. Also, Christine Lottie for Swing Shift. Geraldine Page for The Pope of Greenwich Village. Amadeus wins for Art Direction. Killing Fields wins for Cinematography. And Maurice Jarre won Music for Passage to India. The author of the book goes to see the movie. He loved it and thought it finally turned him into an American writer.
What?
Which shocks me.
Wait a minute.
I know.
You didn't write anything in this. Wow. This is going to make me money. Everyone's going to be suckered in by my book, and it's not going to be nothing like the movie. Wow.
I mean, there are many, many things in the book that are in the movie.
Sure.
It's just except the things that we love. You know? So I don't know how to give. I will give my final thoughts first. I'm not 100% sure how to put it all together because I said things about it that like, why did this doesn't quite make sense? And I'm not quite sure about Roy and Kim Basinger's performance and the logic of how this is all supposed to work doesn't quite all fit together right. And I don't care at all. I felt it was important to bring up those things because that's what we do on the Cine-Files. But in the end, this movie moves me so deeply. It's so the power of it.
Could, Steve, can I ask you? Can I ask this question to get you into your final thoughts?
Yes.
Yes. As you just said, you've pointed out all the things that, and logically, and you can obviously make a case for all the things that don't work for you. Why does the film still work for you in spite of all those things that you pointed out? Because I think that's what's super important about understanding why you love a movie despite its flaws.
Because baseball is magical, and the magic and the baseball in this movie is magic. And you know what? I'm really thank you. I'm really glad you asked this question because you know what stories I read over and over again as a kid? The Tales of the Round Table.
Yeah.
Knights in Shining Armor. I read Superman and Batman. I read the stories about the great mythic heroes. And that is what this story is. And frankly, I never got to play enough catch with my dad. You know? Like, and the thing is that we all have, thank you so much because you put my brain in the right spot because we all have dreams of being the hero of whatever it is, you know, of being the star, the rock star, the athlete, the person who saves the day. And this is a movie about that. But it's also a movie that's deeply human and about regret. Like if we had just seen the young Roy Hobbs go off and be the greatest baseball player every time, I wouldn't love that movie.
Yeah.
It's the old Roy Hobbs that comes back with deep regret and pain and sorrow, who still has connection to the magic. And the fact that this is at its core a story about purity and a story about love, both love of your father and love of the game and love of Iris and Iris's love and overcoming all of that. And those moments of triumph, like they are literally pulling the swords from the stone. You know, like hitting the ball into the clock, hitting the ball into the lights, knocking the cover off the ball. All those moments are so satisfying because they come from a human place, you know, that it manages to combine a deeply human story about real life and regret with the hero of the knight in shining armor. So yes, that is why I love this movie. And thank you again for putting me on the right path.
Yeah, no worries. I will begin my final thoughts with this. Bill Simmons of ESPN compiled Roy Hobbs' 1939 rookie season stats, taking cues from the movie and extrapolating them out in a full season. This is what his line would have looked like. 115 games played because he didn't play the full season, 400 at-bats, 92 runs, 140 hits, 44 home runs, 106 RBIs, and a 350 batting average. He struck out 85 times and walked 75 times. So that's an incredible stat line for your first year in the majors, no matter how old you are, let alone being as old as Roy Hobbs was when he walked back into baseball and only played one season in the major
half a
leagues.
Season, really.
Half a season, right? Yeah. 3/4 of a season, you could argue. But yeah, for me, the film, I love this movie and I will always love this movie because when I was younger, I loved the movie for the flawed hero and the things he had to overcome and the things that I didn't understand as a young teenager that I would confront in life, right? The unexpected twists and turns of life, the promise that everyone's thought you was going to achieve these things and you didn't quite achieve those things you thought you were going to achieve. So later in life, when I watched this movie, there's a magic in the fact that he was still able to come back and try and fight through all these things and eventually try to achieve the things that he achieved in the film, and finds the hero's journey that he does. And so the film itself, from the score to the direction to the performances, as Steve said so well, is magic. It's just magic. There's a purity to this movie that does not hide from the darkness of life, but has him confront the darkness of life, go through the darkness of life, helped by other people who love him, and finding his peace and his forgiveness for himself and his closure for himself, which I think is essential so that he comes back to who he was by the end of the movie. And so many of us go on a journey in life where we lose our way or things come out of nowhere to hurt us. And we spend so much of our lives beating ourselves up rather than confronting the things that hurt us, learning the lessons, growing from those lessons, and becoming better people as a result, and giving ourselves so much grace. And I think that's what Roy had to learn here. And the fact that we can still care about this character because of his vulnerability, because of his foibles, and by the end want this redemption for him. So in spite of the mistakes he makes with these women and with not seeing the Gus and the Judge thing a little earlier, those are the things that bring me back to the film every single time. The direction, the cinematography, the score, the story, but really the message of the film at the end, which is that everyone goes through stuff, and sometimes your life doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, but it doesn't mean that your life still can't have meaning and you still can't find your purpose in life and find a way to enjoy your life. And that's what's important by the end of the movie.
Beautiful, man. So that's what we think about The Natural. Of course, we'd always love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on Facebook. Just do a search for The Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on Twitter, The Cine-Files Podcast on Instagram. We love all your comments there. We also love your comments and reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Reviews on both of those really help us go up in the rankings. They're very important to the show. So please leave them. You can also leave your comments on YouTube. You, as we said at the beginning of the show, you can support us on Apple Podcasts and patreon.com/The Cine-Files. You can buy or stream The Natural along with every other film we've ever reviewed on cinephiles.net. And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would they reach you?
You can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. We just crossed 35,000 subscribers there, marching towards 50. Come and hang out with us there on the Outlaw Nation YouTube channel. And don't forget our YouTube channel, as Steve has said here. Make sure you subscribe there as well. We do live shows every month that you can come hang out with us and talk about a particular movie or subject matter that you all will enjoy.
And we're moving into the scary season on the Cine-Files, which means it's time for our annual Halloween film. And this one, we got a great one for you, which is David Cronenberg's The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. I haven't seen this one in a while, and I honestly cannot wait to dig into its creepy goodness.
Brendo Fly.
So that's The Fly next Friday, right here on the Cine-Files.